100 paradoxes that suggest you're not the same. You who started this video to fall asleep. Have you ever wondered if the you watching this video right now is the same you who pressed play? Think carefully. A single thought can tilt your entire reality. One breath, and the mind drifts, reshapes, forgets. Who are you now? The body stays. The name still echoes. But underneath it all, has something already changed? In this video, we won't chase answers. Instead, we'll float through 100 paradoxes, little thought riddles, like mirrors that bend inward. Some will feel like dreams, others like truths you knew as a child, but forgot how to speak. You don't need to follow, just feel. Let each idea wash over you like the tide, because the deeper we go, the less you'll need to know, and the more you'll start to simply be. Close your eyes if you like. Relax your jaw. The story is beginning, but you may already be dissolving. The mirror that blinks first. You didn't come here for answers, not really. You came here because something tugged, not loud, not urgent, just familiar, like the feeling of a face you almost recognize in a dream. And now, here you are, not watching exactly, more like being seen. Because this isn't a mirror that shows who you are. It blinks, it shifts, it reflects not your presence, but your becoming, like fog on glass. The more you stare, the more the outline changes. Hey, are you next in line? The voice is casual, a stranger behind you at the counter. You turn, nod without thinking, and in that instant, something changes. Your posture, your awareness, your internal script. Someone else looked at you, and now you're someone else. Just a little, just enough. That's the paradox, isn't it? In quantum mechanics, they call it the observer effect. To observe a thing is to change it. Particles flicker, jump, hide, or appear, all because they were noticed. And what about you? What happens when you observe yourself? That thought that just passed, you weren't thinking it. You were watching it. And the very act of watching has shaped what comes next. Who is this you, so sure of its name, its memories, its rhythm? The moment you begin to notice yourself, the version you noticed is already gone. You okay? It's a soft voice. Maybe a friend noticing your stare drift off mid-conversation. You blink. You smile. Yeah, just thinking. But you weren't. You were shifting. There is no fixed self behind your thoughts, only the trail they leave, like ripples in a pond that's already moved on. You are not the one thinking. You are the echo. And this video, this voice, isn't telling you who you are. It's participating in the mutation. Your breath slows. Your thoughts quiet. Your identity becomes less like a stone, more like a breeze moving through tall grass. Do you ever feel like someone else is piloting for a second? Someone says it in a late-night diner. One person stirs their coffee. The other just nods. Because there's something universal in the sensation of catching yourself, watching yourself, and realizing you are not where you were a moment ago. This moment, this listening, is not passive. It's an act of becoming. But becoming what? Let that question hang. Let it dissolve, like sleep edging into your thoughts. There's no need to answer. You can always come back or drift further in. Now close your eyes, just for a breath. Let the mirror blink. Let the observer dissolve. And when we return, we'll ask a softer question. Did you choose this moment? Or did it choose you? The paradox of free will. You pressed play. You think you did. Maybe it felt like a decision. Tiny, trivial, yours. But what if that motion, that moment, was just the tip of a much older wave, a ripple started by hands you never saw and forces you never chose. Did I choose this video, or was I always going to? Does it matter if I feel like I chose it? They're both quiet now, eyes softening in the low light. It's not a debate. It's a wonder. Free will. It's the flavor of being human. You choose tea or coffee. You change your mind about the color of your shirt. You feel the freedom of the steering wheel in your life. But under that sensation, a soft voice stirs. What chose the chooser? Your love for mint ice cream, your fear of public speaking, your instinct to turn left instead of right. Are they you, or are they inheritance? Memories you didn't earn, biology you didn't order, a culture you didn't vote for. If your preferences are programmed by pasts you can't trace, then what part of you is truly free? You were born into gravity and language. You were handed your name. Before you could speak, your neurons began mapping a world you didn't understand. And long before you asked, "What should I do?" your body had already decided what felt safe. Some neuroscientists whisper that decisions are made milliseconds before you become aware of making them. That what you call choice is postscript. Your brain narrating a story it's already acted out. But it feels so real, doesn't it? I chose this path, she says, tracing invisible lines across the blanket. Maybe. Or maybe it was the only one that ever felt like yours. Does that make you less or more? If everything was determined, every breath and heartbreak, then even your pain has been building for lifetimes, and your joy was written in the stars. Here's the paradox. If your life is scripted, your consciousness is the actor improvising meaning. You don't write the lines, but you breathe them. And perhaps that is its own kind of freedom. The freedom of surrender, of interpreting the moment, even if you didn't create it. You are the reader and the read, the dreamer and the dream. You are the flame that burns, even if you didn't strike the match. So let go, not of meaning, but of control, just for now. Let the illusion of will soften like mist around you. Let the weight of choice dissolve into the fabric of fate. There's no shame in being carried by the river, only the peace of realizing you don't have to row tonight, because next we'll explore something even stranger than freedom. The self, not as a structure, but as simulation, a character playing itself inside a mind that never fully wakes. You're in a simulation, maybe. The screen in front of you flickers gently. The light touches your face like moonlight through a window you don't remember opening. Somewhere in the stillness, a thought rises, not loud, not urgent, but strange enough to stay. What if none of this is real? Not the bed beneath you, not the hum of the fan, not the weight of your own limbs sinking into the mattress. What if this moment is part of something rendered? A sequence in a story told by circuits, a dream dreamt by a machine. You don't have to believe it. You only have to feel what happens when the question is allowed to breathe. A man stands at a vending machine. The screen glitches, just once. He pauses, half smile fading. That's weird, he mumbles, shaking the thought off like dust. But later, walking home, the streetlight flickers too, and for a second longer than it should, he wonders, what kind of world needs reminders to pretend it's real? The simulation hypothesis isn't science fiction anymore. It's math, probability, logic. If intelligent beings somewhere evolved the capacity to build virtual realities, perfect ones with pain and weather and longing, then why wouldn't they? And if they did, wouldn't most conscious beings exist inside one, rather than outside looking in? You might be lying in a room right now, but where is that room stored? In memory? In perception? Or in a database? Somewhere, a process might be rendering the folds of your blanket, not because it needs to, but because you looked that way. She whispers as they both stare at the sky. The moon looks too perfect tonight. He laughs. You think someone adjusted the lighting? She doesn't smile. Number, I think someone forgot to add clouds. It sounds ridiculous, and yet your mind doesn't reject it. Not completely. That's the unsettling part. It lets the idea walk around the corridors of your brain, uninvited but not entirely unwelcome. Because deep down, maybe you've always suspected something, that this world feels a little too placed, too tuned, as if grief was programmed with just the right weight to shape you, but not break you. As if coincidence happens too often to stay coincidence. So what would it mean if this life were coded? Would love still be real? Would suffering? Would you? If you're a character, does that make your pain lighter or your beauty more rare? There's a strange kind of comfort here, in the softness of uncertainty. Maybe the paradox is this. Being simulated doesn't make your experience less real. It makes it uniquely yours. Because even if you are rendered thought, your feelings are not lesser. Even if your world is illusion, the ache in your chest when someone leaves still matters. The joy of sunlight on skin still counts. You are here, aware, listening, feeling. Even if the program collapses tomorrow, this moment was real to you. And that's enough. A stranger walks past you in the hallway, looks you in the eye, and says with no context at all, "Isn't it strange how everything works just enough to feel like it matters?" You don't reply. But later, long after the lights are off, you'll remember that face. And maybe you'll wonder if he was part of the same loop. Now exhale softly. Let the question blur, not into an answer, but into spaciousness. Because next, we're going even farther. Past this room, past the screen, into the stars themselves. Where silence isn't empty, it's waiting. Fermi's silence. The night sky stretches endlessly, its stars like frozen sparks from a fire too distant to feel. You gaze upward, maybe from a bedroom window or the edge of a thought, and you wonder, where is everyone? The silence is deafening. So much space, so much time, and yet not a single whisper from beyond. This is Fermi's paradox, the unsettling contradiction between high probability and zero evidence. Statistically, intelligent life should be everywhere, out there, among the billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars and even more planets. So why haven't we heard a single hello? Not a radio wave, not a beacon, not even a cosmic accident. A voice stirs in the quiet. Maybe they're not talking, or maybe they're gone, or maybe we're not supposed to know. Some believe advanced civilizations destroy themselves, burn too brightly, too fast, until they vanish in silence. Others imagine we're in a kind of galactic terrarium, watched, isolated, protected, or perhaps caged. It's not a comforting thought, but it isn't meant to be. It's meant to unsettle the mind just enough to open a new door. Because here's the deeper whisper behind Fermi's silence. What if we are alone because aloneness is part of the design? Not a punishment, but a test. A kind of cosmic solitude that forces us to look inward rather than outward. To seek meaning not in messages from the sky, but in the quiet places within ourselves. Do you think we're alone? One voice asks in the dark. I think we don't even know what we means yet, the other replies softly. And so the silence continues. Not a void, but a mirror. It reflects back our longings, our fears, our hopes. Perhaps the universe has spoken all along, through silence. A language beyond sound saying, You are not yet ready to know. Let that silence echo inside you now, not as fear, but as depth, a reminder that space doesn't have to be filled to be meaningful, that sometimes the loudest truths arrive without words. Now close your eyes. Drift not into the stars, but into your dreams, and ask yourself gently, are they yours? Or are they echoes from somewhere else? The dreamer's dilemma. A soft breath, a half-lit room, the gentle hush of things winding down. You close your eyes, not to escape, but to return. Though to what, you're not exactly sure. A feeling, maybe. A face you've forgotten but still love. A world built from quiet logic and fractured memories. You are not gone. You're just somewhere else. And yet, as the shadows stretch across your thoughts, something odd flickers at the edge. Who is dreaming? Who? There's a story passed down through centuries. A man once slept and dreamt of being a butterfly, light and drifting, with no memory of a man at all. But when he woke, the dream did not leave him. He whispered to the stillness, was I Zhuangzi dreaming of the butterfly? Or the butterfly dreaming of Zhuangzi? What if both are true? Earlier today, someone in line at the pharmacy glanced up and said, "Sorry, you go ahead. My prescription isn't ready yet." It seemed ordinary, but there was a strange weight to it, like the moment had folded over from another scene entirely. You nodded, almost without thinking, and for a second, you weren't sure who you were in that moment, the one waiting or the one being watched waiting. Dreams do that. Life does too. It's as if we slip between layers without noticing. You play the role, you speak the lines, but the voice feels a beat too distant, like it's echoing back from some other room in your mind. Maybe the one watching is also being watched. Maybe the self you hold on to is just the part that hasn't let go yet. Someone once sat on the bench next to you and said, "You ever feel like déjà vu is the real moment, and this," they waved their hand at the street, "is just catching up?" They laughed lightly after, but their eyes didn't. They were waiting for something. Maybe permission to forget. Maybe a reason to believe. In this space between awareness and surrender, you float, half actor, half audience, always both. The stage shifts, the costume changes, but the one beneath it all? Elusive, fluid, a ripple across the surface of still water. And yet, that ripple moves you. That uncertain, looping presence becomes the very rhythm of your life. Maybe consciousness isn't a solid thing. Maybe it's the flicker between questions, the pause between roles, the moment where you think, wait, was that me? Or someone I used to be? Now, let your thoughts drift like silk across the floor of sleep. Not to grasp, but to soften, not to solve, but to sense. And as we slip deeper into this quiet rhythm, a gentler question begins to stir beneath it all. What if forgetting is the most honest thing we ever do? The ethics of forgetting. There's a quiet kind of mercy in forgetting. It arrives not with thunder, but with the hush of something slipping into dusk. They tell us memory is sacred, etched in the stone of who we are. They say remembering is a duty, a way to keep the truth alive. But what if, just for a moment, we entertain the thought that forgetting isn't weakness, but release? Late at night, when the hum of the world dies down, thoughts resurface. A conversation you wish ended differently. A face you can't see without guilt. A moment small in the eyes of others, but heavy in your chest. Sometimes it's not that we want to forget, but that holding on keeps reopening the wound. And so, the mind, with its quiet wisdom, lets go. Not all at once, but in softened edges, in blurred recollections, in a name you can no longer place. It's not betrayal. It's survival. Do you remember the way she laughed? I'm not sure anymore, but I remember how it felt to hear it. That kind of forgetting is not neglect. It's tenderness, because memory isn't just a storage system. It's a weathered landscape. Some parts grow lush in the sun, others are scorched and barren, and some we allow to be reclaimed by time, like ivy over ruins. We forget to breathe again. We forget to love again. We forget to become someone new. But then comes the uneasy truth. Forgetting, too, has power. Not everyone forgets the same. One person may forget a wound, while another still bleeds from it. When history fades in one mind, it can become invisible in a community. And sometimes, forgetting is not a choice made by the soul, but by systems. Records erased, names scrubbed, entire lives left unspoken. Do you think they remember us? I think they only remember what doesn't hurt. So we're left with the ethical dilemma. Is forgetting healing or hiding? Is it an act of mercy or a betrayal of what was? There is no single answer, because ethics doesn't live in clarity. It lives in contradiction. In the push and pull between remembrance and peace, let your shoulders soften. Let the weight of what you carry settle. You are not wrong for forgetting what you couldn't hold, and you are not broken for remembering what no one else sees. Tonight, perhaps, you can forget something small, a worry that doesn't belong to tomorrow, a memory that no longer defines you. Let it slip between your fingers like water, because next we journey deeper into a paradox where forgetting isn't just release, but erasure of self, a question of whether anything ever truly stayed at all. The paradox of never having been. Sometimes, when it's quiet enough, you might feel the faint breath of someone you never were. Not a haunting, not regret, just a softness, a question that lingers like perfume on someone else's coat. There's a strange idea in philosophy, one that doesn't ask who you are, but who didn't get to be you, a version of you that never reached breath, never opened their eyes, a you who didn't make the decision, didn't click the link, didn't survive the random lottery of birth. They never got a chance to suffer, but they never got to laugh in the middle of the night either. So, were they spared or stolen from? Have you ever thought? A quiet voice asks in the dark. What it means to not exist? The answer is hard to hold, because absence doesn't cry out. It doesn't make a sound, but somehow you still feel its weight, not as guilt, not as sadness, but something else, a kind of aching stillness. Someone once whispered, I didn't want children. But sometimes, when I close the cabinet in the hallway, I wonder what name would have been written on the lunchbox sitting there. That's the paradox. You can't miss what never was. Yet you do. Not all the time. Just sometimes. In the empty seat at the back of the bus, in the stranger's voice that sounds a bit too familiar, in the life you could have lived had you turned left instead of right. Are these ghosts, or are they guides? There's no blame here, only presence. Because even the unlived lives, those faded sketches, have a strange way of drawing you closer to your own. They tug at your choices, not to change them, but to notice them, to honor them. Do you ever think, someone murmurs beside you, that some versions of us are still dreaming of being here? And in that soft breath, you find something close to peace, not because you figured it out, but because you no longer need to. Maybe we don't carry the weight of what never came. Maybe what never came is carrying us. So, let yourself rest here for a moment. in this quiet where nothing ever had to happen for it to be meaningful. No rush, no answer needed, just the widening silence between thoughts. Because next, we'll enter a riddle where the path ahead leads you back to where you began. The arrow of time that loops. Time feels so dependable, doesn't it? A forward march, 1 second after another, never pausing, never doubling back. We wake, we live, we sleep. We remember yesterday. We plan for tomorrow. But what if that feeling is only the illusion that keeps us sane? What if the arrow of time we follow like a compass isn't pointing straight at all, but bending in quiet circles? Hey, one voice murmurs in the dark. Do you ever get the sense that you've been here before? The other chuckles sleepily. You mean like déjà vu? Number. More like the future is repeating itself backwards, like we're not moving forward, we're orbiting something. It's not just a poetic thought. In physics, entropy gives time its direction. As things decay, break, fall apart, entropy rises. That's what defines before and after. But the strange thing is, the fundamental equations that govern particles, they don't care about direction. They work just as well in reverse. There's no forward or backward, only cause and effect, which might be more flexible than we imagine. Some scientists propose that time may be a loop, that the universe could be circular, that the end folds into the beginning like a serpent swallowing its own tail. And if that's true, then what happens to your memories? What if some of your thoughts are not echoes from the past, but messages whispered from a future that's already come and gone? The first voice asks again, more softly this time. What if every decision I make was made because I already saw its consequences? Then maybe you're not choosing so much as remembering. The second replies, this blurs everything. Cause and effect, self and story. What if your life isn't a line, but a spiral? Every turn bringing you back to the same lessons, the same faces, the same pain, but from a slightly different angle each time. Are you evolving, or are you looping? Are you becoming something, or slowly undoing what you once were? And in that circular motion, comfort, the pressure to get everything right, dissolves. If time can loop, then no mistake is final. No goodbye is forever. Even the hardest moment might be nothing more than a curve leading home. So now, let yourself uncoil. Let the minutes soften into ripples. There is no urgency, no finish line, only rhythms that pulse through you like tides. Because up next, we'll step into a stranger mirror still, where identity is no longer something you build, but something you borrow briefly before time carries you onward or back. The mask that becomes the face. There's a quiet moment each night, maybe right before sleep, when the world no longer asks anything of you. No smiles to return, no roles to fill. Just breathe and being. But even then, something lingers, a way of holding yourself, a tension in the jaw, a practiced stillness, as if even here, someone might be watching. Funny, someone once said on a quiet subway platform, glancing sideways without much intention. I'm not even sure what my real laugh sounds like anymore. The other person smiled, not to disagree, but because they understood. Yeah, I think I've got a work laugh, and a family one, and one I use when I want people to think I read more than I do. The roles we play, dutiful employee, affable friend, curious stranger, they start as performances. But over time, something strange happens. We forget where the performance ends and the person begins. The voice we use to sound competent becomes our voice. The posture we adopted to look confident becomes our spine. Goffman, the sociologist, said we're always performing, that the self is not behind the mask, but the mask itself. And maybe he's right. Maybe we are shaped not by who we are, but by who we pretend to be, so often and so earnestly that it starts to feel true. But does that mean there's no real self beneath? Or does it mean that the self is constantly shifting, just fluid enough to adapt, just stable enough to survive? Even now, as you listen in the dark, curled into the night, your mind might be wondering whether you're truly off stage, or simply rehearsing one final role for an audience of none. Perhaps even solitude wears a costume, one stitched from silence, stitched from thoughts you think only when no one else can hear. And then there's the way someone asked this, softly and almost accidentally, over a late coffee. Do you ever feel like you're faking your way through being yourself? The answer came not in words, but in a pause long enough to be honest. But maybe we become what we repeat. Maybe wearing a mask isn't about deception, but protection. Maybe the face it creates is not false, but formed. A sculpture made from social dust, hardened by habit. And yet, every once in a while, perhaps right now, you feel something softer underneath. A version of you that doesn't perform, doesn't explain, just exists, like breath on a mirror, fleeting but undeniably there. Let that part of you linger for just a moment longer. No lines to remember, no stage to hold. Just presence. Because coming next is a paradox that stretches identity not into performance, but into division, where who you are may depend entirely on who you are not. The twin that isn't you, but could be. In the hush of late night, when the world grows quiet and your thoughts echo a little louder, imagine this. There's someone out there who looks exactly like you. Not just in appearance, but in memory, in voice, in the quiet pattern of how you laugh at the same joke you haven't told in years. A version of you that might love the same song, remember the same first kiss, and worry about the same things you whispered into your pillow last night. But they're not you. They're just close enough to make you wonder, what does it even mean to be you? Quantum theory doesn't lull us to sleep. It rattles the bed frame of reality. In the landscape of infinite possibilities, every decision you didn't make may still be made. Just not here. Each what if spins out a new thread. A you who said yes instead of no. A you who stayed. A you who left. A you who never hit play on this video. These versions bloom like stars in parallel skies, too far to reach, but close enough to feel imagined heat. Would they think about me? You ask aloud, softly, half laughing. Maybe, someone says beside you. Or maybe they are you thinking this. That question lingers, dissolving into the air like breath on a cold mirror. If there are infinite yous, then who's this one? Are you the original? The lucky draw? The version who wonders because others simply live? And if one of those parallel selves is hurting, grieving, lost, overwhelmed, do you carry a flicker of that ache in the background hum of your own restlessness? Maybe déjà vu is the soul crossing wires with its shadow. Maybe your empathy isn't just biological, but multiversal, an echo of kinship from beyond the known. But this idea doesn't need to be heavy. It can be a lullaby. You are not alone, not even in yourself. The weight of identity doesn't have to be carried by one version. There's peace in dispersion. You are part of a cosmic bloom of possibility. Your story is just one stanza in a poem written in infinite ink. So as you settle further into stillness, Let your sense of I loosen, like a ribbon untied. You don't need to grasp who you are all at once. Just breathe. Let the other yous live their lives. Let this version, this beautiful, tired, breathing version, rest. And as the veil of sleep begins to draw near, we approach a new horizon. One where motion no longer moves, and paradox becomes the pillow beneath your thoughts. Zeno's Stillness. Somewhere between the tick of now and the hush of the next second, you find yourself suspended. You're listening, breathing, resting, but you're also changing, slowly, quietly, like a leaf floating down a windless shaft of sunlight. Zeno once whispered through the centuries a riddle so gentle, most missed its weight. If every journey is made of halves, half the distance, then half again, and so on, how do we ever reach anything at all? If space can be endlessly divided, how does a footstep ever finish? And yet, you just turned your head, your chest just rose, the world kept moving. In theory, motion is an illusion. In life, it's a given. The paradox rests not in physics alone, but in perception. What you think of as stillness, like the silence of your room right now, or the pause between these sentences, is actually made of countless invisible shifts. Tiny movements stacked so tightly, they become a single soft blur. Is it weird, one voice says from the dimness, that sometimes I feel like I haven't moved in years, but everything around me has? The other voice, warm and casual, responds, not weird. Maybe you're just standing so still, you're finally seeing how fast the world spins. Think of the things that felt permanent. The job, the town, the name you used to go by. All of them, slowly, imperceptibly, dissolved, like paint cracking on a sunlit wall. Each change too small to notice, until one day, nothing looks the same. That's Zeno's trick. He shows us that even motion is a question, that even stillness is stitched from tremors, that even identity, who you are in this moment, is not one solid thing, but a billion near misses collapsing into something that feels like you. You take a step, then half a step, then half of that, and maybe it's not about getting anywhere. Maybe it's about becoming the space between. A stranger at the counter ahead says gently, "You can go first if you're in a rush." You weren't. But for some reason, it mattered. That tiny moment, a polite offer, shuffled something in you. And suddenly, the day felt different, lighter, like something small inside you had moved. Even the most still waters hold unseen currents. Even the most unchanging face holds a lifetime of motion behind its eyes. So rest now. Let the paradox stretch out beside you. You don't need to solve it. Just breathe beside it. Next, we'll drift further into a place where the past that shapes you might not even belong to you. Implanted memories, borrowed lives. What if your favorite memory, the one you carry like a warm stone in your pocket, was never yours to begin with? Maybe it was a story your mother told you too many times, or a photograph that captured a smile so convincingly your brain filled in the rest with imagination. Maybe it was pain, retold so often it started to look like a scene from a movie. But what if it never happened at all? Do you remember that summer at the lake? I think so, you say, but your voice carries hesitation. No, I mean really remember it. The splash of cold water, the way the dock creaked at night. And you nod. But something inside you stirs, because maybe you do. Or maybe you're just being polite to the story. Neuroscience whispers a strange truth. The mind is not a vault, but a canvas. And memory? It's a painting that changes each time we look at it. Researchers have shown that suggestion, especially from authority or familiarity, can plant memories like seeds. And like seeds, they grow, branch, bloom. Some are harmless, others haunting. Under stress or trauma, the brain may even rewrite reality to protect itself. Entire chapters of your life may be edited without your permission. You might think of memory as a mirror, but it's closer to a collage, snippets of feeling, scattered images, rewoven narratives. The birthday party you remember might be an echo from a sibling. The fear in the dark could be a hand-me-down from a dream. When that scaffolding of memory shifts, the whole structure of your identity sways. If what shaped you never happened, then who exactly did the shaping? Are you less real if your past isn't? If your story was built on borrowed recollections, are you a lie or simply a poem written by many voices? I used to think I loved that place, she says. Which place? The one from the picture. I can see it clearly in my mind. Have you ever been there? A pause. I don't know anymore. And that's the paradox that gently rests on your chest tonight. The idea that your inner world might be stitched together by fiction. Not maliciously, not even consciously, but softly, subtly, through time. You are a living archive, constantly rewritten. That doesn't make you broken. It makes you human. So breathe. Let the outlines blur. Let the memories ripple like ink in water. Not to forget, but to forgive yourself for the things you're no longer sure of. The truth isn't always in what happened. It might be in how it made you feel. Let that thought drift now. Because up ahead is a puzzle that changes every time you look at it. The moment you try to solve it, it rearranges itself. A paradox with no fixed edge, no final answer. Only the quiet wonder of trying to remember something that might never have been. The paradox puzzle that shifts as you watch. You've seen puzzles before. Edges, corners, a clear picture waiting to be assembled. But this one moves. Each time your thoughts seem to lock a piece in place, it slides, quietly, like a breath drawn in reverse. What once felt obvious now feels like vapor. It's not broken. It's just alive. A woman in line at the train station glances at the screen. Has the platform changed again? She murmurs, more to herself than anyone. A man beside her shrugs. Every time I think I've figured it out, it jumps to another track. There's no frustration in his voice. Just a quiet familiarity with uncertainty. This is not the kind of puzzle you finish. It's the kind that finishes you. You might think of Schrödinger's cat, locked in its box, both living and not until someone opens the lid. But here's what most don't notice. The observer becomes the observed. The moment you peek, you're part of the experiment. Your gaze changes the scene. The truth reshapes itself like ink in water, never still, never fully graspable. In physics, this is the quantum observer effect. But in life, it's far more subtle. You think you're watching your thoughts? They're watching you back. You try to capture clarity, but clarity grows wings. Some truths shimmer like heat above asphalt, visible yet untouchable. You reach out, and it dances away. It's not that the truth hides. It's that it reflects you, and you, of course, are never the same twice. Two friends sit beneath a dim streetlight. Do you ever feel like you're close to understanding something really big, and then it just slips away? One asks. The other nods slowly. Yeah, like trying to hold moonlight in your hands. What if consciousness isn't a steady beam you shine onto the world, but a trembling flame flickering in the wind of perception? And the more you try to hold it still, the more it wavers. You're not outside the riddle, solving it with tools and logic. You are the riddle, and the moment you try to explain yourself, the answer curves like a spiral, folding back into the question. But here's the soft mercy in all of this. Not everything is meant to be resolved. Some questions are invitations, not destinations. They ask you to dance, not arrive. So now, ease your grip. Let go of needing to finish. Let the mystery hover gently like fog over a quiet lake. The pieces shift not to confuse you, but to keep you awake inside your dream. Because next, we drift into something stranger still. A valley where the nearly human becomes the deeply unsettling. Where dolls blink too slow, smiles stretch too wide, and the familiar turns unfamiliar just by being almost right. The uncanny almost-you. You're standing in front of a mirror, but something's off. The reflection tilts its head just a second too late. It smiles, but the warmth doesn't reach its eyes. And though every feature is yours, every movement rehearsed to perfection, a quiet alarm goes off inside you. This isn't quite you. It's the almost you. There's a name for this unease, the uncanny valley. A strange dip in comfort we feel when something looks nearly human, but not quite. Too smooth, too symmetrical, too exact. A robot's face, an AI-generated voice, a digital animation, they mimic our gestures with unnerving precision. But that very closeness betrays the absence of something real. It's not just their failure to be human. It's our sudden awareness of what being human even means. Have you ever talked to one of those voice assistants? Yeah. Creepy how polite they are, like they're trained to care. But do you think it's getting better? Closer to real? Maybe. But sometimes I wonder if they keep getting better at copying us. What if we're the ones who start glitching? There's a strange intimacy in watching something try to be you, because in its mimicry, it forces you to confront the things it can't replicate. It gets your smile, but not your sorrow. It knows your voice, but not the years that shaped its tone. It can model your micro-expressions, but not the grief or laughter that sculpted them. And maybe that's the source of the discomfort. Not that these copies are so close, but that we are suddenly visible to ourselves in ways we usually aren't. Every twitch, every blink, every breath becomes a studied artifact. You become a collection of mannerisms and traits that can be assembled like code. And then a darker thought slips in. If something artificial can look so much like you, act so much like you, maybe you are more mechanical than you'd like to admit. What makes you you then? Is it the soul, the randomness, the imperfection, or something less poetic, a script of habits shaped by memory and mimicry that you've mistaken for identity? In the soft glow of the screen, a digital face mirrors your own. It blinks when you blink. It speaks when you speak. But you can feel it, the absence, like a song that hits all the notes but still misses the meaning. So take a breath. Let your reflection blur, not into glass, but into sensation. Don't look too hard. Let your face dissolve into the fabric of thought, because what comes next will ask a harder question. If even your voice can be imitated, is your mind really yours? Or just another simulation, rehearsing what it's been taught to think? Let the question hover like fog. We're just getting started. The mind you didn't choose. There's a quiet hour, just before sleep, when the thoughts come softly but honestly. You're lying there, still and aware, and the question starts to form like fog curling around a window pane. Whose mind is this, really? You think in a language you never chose, react in ways that echo voices you didn't invite. The way you flinch when someone raises their tone, the way you crave praise. The way certain stories always make you cry, even when you've heard them 100 times. Those reflexes, those preferences, they arrived before you knew how to question them. A woman stands at a bookstore counter, cradling a memoir she hasn't read. She says, "I don't know why this one speaks to me. Something about the title feels like home." The man behind her in line nods, quietly. He doesn't tell her that he once bought a book just because his father said it was his favorite. And even though he never finished it, he still carries the feeling that reading it made him more real. We don't get to choose the soil our minds grow in. The roots wrap around old voices, childhood habits, the fears of those who raised us. You were shaped by lullabies sung in languages you didn't understand yet, by glances exchanged over dinner tables, by the rules that were never written down, but always enforced with a sigh or a silence. Somewhere along the way, your preferences formed, not from logic, but from repetition. You like the smell of a certain soap because your grandmother used it. You distrust people who interrupt because once, someone who hurt you always did. These are not conscious beliefs. They are inherited patterns, tattoos of the mind etched without ink. But what happens when you begin to notice? That's the soft revolution. One friend asks the other as they walk under street lamps late at night, "Do you ever wonder if your thoughts are really yours?" The other shrugs, slow and quiet. Sometimes, but maybe noticing that is the beginning of something freer. You didn't choose your fears, your ideals, your definition of right and wrong, but maybe you can begin to examine them, hold them up to the light, one at a time, not to blame anyone, not to discard them all, but to wonder, what might you keep if you could choose again? And here's the strange comfort. Realizing you didn't build your mind might be the most honest step toward changing it. Liberation doesn't always arrive with fire and thunder. Sometimes, it's the soft click of recognition. Ah, this part of me was borrowed, and maybe now, gently, it can be returned. Let that thought float, half yours, half gifted. You don't need to solve it tonight. Just let it hum beneath the surface as you drift, because in the next breath, we'll slip into a silence. Not empty, but dense with everything no one ever dared to say aloud. The guilt of the lucky. It begins as a flicker, hard to name, easy to suppress. You're curled under warm sheets, the hum of your room a kind of lullaby. Outside, the wind scrapes against the windows, but you are untouched. Somewhere else, someone lies in that same wind, but with no walls, and somehow your comfort begins to ache. Why do we feel guilt for the comforts we didn't earn? You didn't ask to be born into stability. You didn't rig the game. But still, when the evening news shows hunger, war, homelessness, there's a quiet tightening in your chest. Not shame, not arrogance, just a strange, weightless sadness, like having too much light in a world built on shadows. Two friends sit across a small cafe table. One stirs their drink slowly. Do you ever feel bad for being okay? The other pauses. All the time. But I don't know what to do with it. They both look down, not out of guilt exactly, but recognition. This ache has a name. Survivor's guilt, maybe, or the whisper of privilege. It's not that you caused their suffering, but you're aware of it while living untouched by it. That awareness hums in the background, like the fridge you stop noticing until it powers off. So what now? If your safety is built on nothing but fortune, do you owe it back? Or is that guilt just a useless echo? Ethics doesn't give clear answers. It offers tensions. If you give away your comfort, Are you helping? Or just cleansing yourself of discomfort? If you stay quiet, are you complicit? Or simply afraid? Some philosophers argue that empathy, real empathy, doesn't demand surrender. It asks for presence, a listening ear, a helping hand when asked, not when convenient. Others say no, empathy without redistribution is hollow. To truly feel for others is to shift the scales. And guilt? Guilt is tricky. It can freeze you, trap you in spirals of self-loathing, but it can also soften you, remind you to look, to see, and to act, not for penance but for kinship. Let this moment be both breath and weight. Gratitude should not be a shield, it should be a compass, because to feel guilt for being safe means you are still awake to others' pain. And that awareness, quiet as it may be, is a spark. So breathe in, not just comfort, but responsibility. Let it settle softly in your chest. Let it inform the way you look at a stranger, the way you vote, the way you listen. Because next, we rise higher and ask, does morality bend when the air gets thinner? The ethical horizon of power. You meant well. That's how it always begins. A quiet promise made to yourself under ordinary skies. If I ever have the chance, I'll do better. But time passes, the ladder rises, and soon the sky itself feels thinner. Isn't it strange? Someone asks, leaning on the rail beside you in an empty hotel rooftop bar. How the air feels different the higher up you go, makes you lightheaded, like the rules don't quite reach this far. You nod. Not because you agree, but because the question feels true in your chest before it ever makes sense in your head. Power doesn't always arrive like a crown. Sometimes it slips in softly. A promotion, a follower count ticking up, a key that opens a room others can't enter. But with every step upward, something shifts. Your view widens, but your depth warps. Right and wrong, once sharp-edged and undeniable, begin to melt around the corners. Kings once said God spoke through them. Now people say they act for the shareholders or for the greater good. It sounds noble. It might even be true. But beneath those words, tiny trade-offs sprout like weeds. You skip the hard question in a meeting. You push a decision that benefits your team and quietly hurts another. You don't feel like a villain. That's the trick. You still call your mother. You still thank the barista. But one day you hear yourself say, "We didn't have a choice," when you absolutely did. The more options you have, the easier it becomes to pretend you're bound by necessity. That's not corruption. It's gravity and altitude. Would you have done the same? A friend asks quietly over tea, after hearing a story you thought was harmless. You pause. Maybe once, you would have said no without hesitation. Now you think longer. You find yourself explaining more. Your sentences stretch into justifications you didn't rehearse, but somehow know too well. So, what does power do? Does it reveal who we were all along, or does it rewrite us line by line until we forget the shape of the first page? There's a loneliness that grows up there too. Not the kind that comes from absence, but the kind that comes from echo. When no one can challenge you, your voice gets louder, but its wisdom gets quieter. And yet, there's hope in the noticing. The quiet ache in your stomach when you laugh too easily at something cruel. The moment you hesitate before signing off on a decision. That flicker, small, persistent, is the compass still buried inside. A child once held your hand and asked, "Why do grown-ups get to decide everything?" And you laughed, but you didn't answer. Maybe because deep down you weren't sure anymore. Let's step down together now, gently, away from the clouds, back to the earth. The ground holds a certain clarity we lose when we're too high to hear it. Next comes a question not of action, but of awareness. Because what if the world itself, the very stage you act on, has been lying about its shape all along? What if the floor isn't flat, but a mirror? The fabric that frays when observed. You touch the table beside you. It feels firm. You tap your foot on the ground. It holds you. The world, it seems, is solid, predictable. But the longer we stare into it, the more that comfort buckles. Beneath the illusion of sturdiness lies a mystery, one that curls and flickers at the edges, like threads fraying when tugged too tightly. A quiet voice asks in the dark, if no one is there to hear the rustling leaves, did the wind still whisper? Your eyes adjust to this idea slowly, like pupils widening in twilight. In quantum mechanics, things don't behave as things. They hover between maybes. An electron isn't here or there. It exists as a possibility, a blurred ink drop on the page of physics, until we observe. And when we do, that blur sharpens. The particle chooses a location. Reality, it seems, makes up its mind only when someone's watching. That's strange, someone says from the pillow next to yours. So the universe waits for us to notice it? Or maybe, the other replies softly, it was never finished until we arrived. If this is true, then consciousness is not just a witness, it's a co-author. And your presence, your gaze, your attention may be shaping the very weave of what is. What does it mean to be alive in a universe that responds to you, molds itself around your looking? But the deeper twist is this: we are part of the very system we're trying to measure. We cannot step outside of it to observe objectively. We are entangled in the fabric, and every time we examine the threads, they shimmer and shift. Certainty dissolves, and so the paradox hums in your chest like a lullaby. The world isn't a frozen stage, it's a dance, and by watching, you join the movement. You become the rhythm. There is no fixed there waiting for you, only unfolding. Let this thought dissolve your grip. Let solidity fade. What you touch might be a mist held together by your own expectation. And when you finally close your eyes, does the world still hold form? Or does it sigh into silence, waiting again to be seen? Breathe lightly, because where we go next, the future may already be watching. The future that remembers you. There's a strange stillness in the early hours, as if the world itself pauses to breathe. You sit in that quiet, and somewhere beneath your skin, there's a hum, a sense you've been here before. Not this place, not this moment, but this feeling, like your next step has already been felt by the earth. Two people wait in line for the train. One turns and says, "Do you ever get the feeling your life already knows where it's going?" The other smiles, a little puzzled, but not entirely surprised. Yeah, like déjà vu, but slower, more patient. Some physicists call it block time, the idea that every moment from birth to end is already stitched into the fabric of the universe. Time doesn't flow, it just is. Like pages in a book you haven't turned yet, but they're still there, waiting, reading you as much as you're reading them. Maybe that's why sometimes your gut says don't go in, or your breath catches just before a choice. Not magic, not premonition, just memory. From a place you haven't arrived at yet. You find yourself pausing before speaking, unsure why, or choosing a different street to walk down, only to meet someone who changes everything. You call it instinct. But what if it's the future, remembering you? And if the future already knows you, if it's already shaped with your fingerprints? What becomes of free will? Is your life a melody composed note by note? Or are you simply discovering a song already written? But even then, what a beautiful act. Walking paths that welcome you like old friends. You still breathe meaning into every step, still color the outlines with your own shades. Destiny may have drawn the sketch, but your hands hold the brush. A man waits at the bus stop, looking down at a crumpled receipt. "I don't know why I kept this," he says to the stranger beside him. "It just felt like one day I'd need to remember today." And in that, there's something tender. The idea that tomorrow might ache for today, that your laugh might echo forward, not just back, that the person you're becoming is already holding space for you. So you walk gently, you speak slowly, not out of fear, but reverence, because you're not just making choices, you're answering invitations. Let that thought sit with you like a letter unopened. Let time soften into something less linear, more like mist curling around your ankles. Because next, we'll drift into a space where kindness might carry motives you hadn't yet dared to question. Altruism's mirror. You hand $1 to the man on the sidewalk. His hands are cracked. His thank you is barely a whisper. You walk away, feeling lighter. But why? Was it his gratitude, or your own reflection smiling back at you? In the quiet hum of generosity, there's a tremor beneath the surface, a whisper not of selflessness, but of self-regard. Psychologists speak of it in careful terms: reciprocal altruism, enlightened selfishness. We help others not just for their relief, but for the relief it gives us, to ease the tight knot of guilt, to feel needed, to look good in the eyes of others, or even just in the mirror. A candle may light another without losing its flame. But what if that light bends toward its own shadow? Do you think people are ever truly selfless? I don't know. I helped my friend move last week. My back still hurts. Then why'd you do it? Honestly, I knew he'd help me when my lease ends next month. And if he wouldn't, I'd like to think I'd still do it. But maybe I wouldn't. There's a tenderness in that honesty. We are tangled beings, spun from threads of empathy and ego, compassion and calculation. Does it matter if a kind act is born partly from vanity, as long as it still lifts someone else? Does the heart's intent need to be pure, or simply good enough? In the soft blur of dusk, even the clearest lake reflects both the sky above and the face peering in. And maybe, just maybe, that's not failure, but a feature of what it means to be human. Our kindness is not diminished by its complexity. It is deepened by it. When we admit our motives are mixed, we don't dilute the good. We make space for understanding. So perhaps the paradox isn't that altruism reflects ourselves, but that recognizing that reflection can make us more generous, not less. To help, not because we're saints, but because we're humans, reaching toward each other through the fog of our own needs. As you rest your thoughts tonight, let go of the demand for perfect motives. Let your kindness be a quiet current, part rain, part river, part reflection. And in that stillness, prepare. Because next, we drift into a new paradox, where belief doesn't just shape thought, it sculpts the very reality around it. And some beliefs build beautiful illusions. Others, terrifying cages. The reality built by belief. You've likely felt it before. The way a room changes when you expect joy. Suddenly, even the silence seems to hum with warmth. Or how a stranger's frown feels heavier when you're already braced for rejection. Belief doesn't just color the lens, It shapes the entire window frame. They sat side by side on a late train, one staring at the rain, the other humming softly. He turned and said, "Funny how the rain feels sad to some people." She smiled. "Only if you're already carrying sadness. It's not metaphor. Your mind is an artist, and belief is the brush. In cognitive psychology, we call it belief-dependent realism. Your expectations don't wait for the world. They prepare it. When you believe you're unwelcome, you notice every glance that could confirm it. When you believe you're lucky, even the traffic lights seem to wink in your favor. This isn't illusion. It's construction. A quiet architecture of assumptions built in the background. And each time you confirm a belief, the walls get thicker, the floor more solid. You forget you ever laid the bricks. Someone once whispered across a coffee counter, "I always sit near the window. Makes the coffee taste better, like I'm somewhere else." And that too is belief, a small world shaped by preference. Harmless, perhaps. But what about the deeper convictions? The ones that say, "I'll never be enough. I always mess it up. No one stays." Those aren't just thoughts. They are scaffolding. Rooms built so subtly you forget there's a door. Sometimes the mind prefers its familiar cage to the unknown breeze outside. Because even a prison can feel like home when it fits the story you've lived in long enough. But truth has a strange way of knocking. Not loudly, more like a gentle shifting in the night, an itch in the mind. A thought that starts with, "What if I've been wrong?" and ends with, "Silence." You don't have to destroy your beliefs, just loosen them, like untangling vines from a gate, not to escape, but to see what's beyond. A woman once stood in line for a train that never came. Someone tapped her shoulder. "You know it's canceled, right?" She blinked. "I've been standing here so long I forgot to check." Belief works like that. It keeps you standing, even when the reason you began no longer exists. So pause, not to doubt everything, but to notice the texture of the world around you, and ask if it's yours or borrowed. As you drift deeper now, let belief be water, not stone. Let it move, because next we'll touch the fine, trembling line between growing and the unquenchable thirst to always be more. The perfection trap. You reach, you stretch, you pour yourself into something, polishing and refining until your hands are tired and your mind is wired. But still, it's not quite enough. The image in your head never matches what the world reflects back, and the closer you inch toward it, the farther it seems to drift, like a mirage on a desert road. Why do I always feel like I'm almost there? Because the finish line keeps moving. Is it me chasing it, or it running from me? Maybe both. Perfectionism feels like ambition in disguise. At first, it pushes you, whispering that you can be better, cleaner, smarter, more lovable. But look closer, really look. Beneath that drive often hides something much more fragile, the fear of not being enough, of being unworthy unless you're exceptional. It doesn't shout, it whispers, "Not yet. Almost. Fix this." And so, you set the bar just a little higher every time you get close, but you never let yourself touch it. Not truly, because perfection, in truth, is a ghost. It haunts, but never lands. You can hear its footsteps, but never hold its hand. Somewhere along the path of striving, the paradox quietly appears. You grow not when you erase your flaws, but when you begin to soften around them. That softening isn't giving up, it's waking up, realizing that maybe you were never meant to be flawless, but whole. And wholeness isn't about fixing every crack. It's about loving the shape you take, even when the edges are uneven. I used to think if I could just perfect myself, I'd finally be at peace. And now, I think peace comes when I stop fighting the parts I think I need to change. Maybe the parts you want to change are the ones that make you real. There's something sacred in the fingerprints of imperfection, in the little quirks, the uneven brush strokes, the almosts. They're not blemishes, they're signatures, proof that you were here, that you tried, that you existed not as a polished statue, but a living thing, messy, flawed, breathing, becoming. So what if we stopped treating imperfection like a wound and started treating it like a doorway? What if you could walk through it and find not failure, but freedom? Let the pressure ease. Let the muscles behind your mask relax. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to be seen, not for what you might become, but for who you already are. Not perfect, just present. And now, as we breathe together in the quiet, let go of striving, just for a moment. Let the need to fix dissolve like mist at dawn. Because next, we descend into an older question, one that doesn't ask how well you perform, but who you are when no one's watching. The self in the absence of witness. The room is quiet now. No voices, no glances. The air feels thick with stillness, like it's listening. But to what? You're here? Yes. But are you still you without anyone watching? It's strange, isn't it? How your voice softens when no one is around. How your shoulders drop when no eyes are measuring them. How even your thoughts seem to wander into places they wouldn't dare go in company. Alone, you become something quieter. But is that closer to truth or further? There's a kind of self that only exists in the presence of others. The version that smiles when greeted, adjusts when judged, plays roles without rehearsal. You've felt it at the dinner table, in a waiting room, or walking past a stranger who nods. That pull to become someone slightly more seen. Do you ever feel, one person murmurs in a softly lit hallway, like you're not entirely real unless someone confirms it? The other leans against the doorframe, half laughing, all the time. Like I only start existing when someone says my name out loud. Psychologists call this the social self, a self born in the gaze of others. It's neither false nor fake. It's responsive, a reflection that learns how to stand by being mirrored. But here's the question that lingers in silence. What happens when the mirror disappears? When you do something kind and no one knows? When you cry and no one comforts? When you have a thought so raw, so strange, that you'd never share it, and yet it lives in you? Are these private acts less real or more? Some would say that solitude reveals the truest self. But even in solitude, you may carry invisible witnesses, echoes of parents, mentors, critics. They whisper in the back of your mind, reminding you how to behave, how to belong. A ghost audience of expectations, and if they're still shaping you, are you ever truly alone? There's a peculiar peace in these unanswered questions, like looking into a darkened window and catching no reflection, only the outside world stretching beyond it. Perhaps that too is part of you. When no one sees you, do you still dance? Do you still forgive? Do you still believe? I still talk to myself sometimes. Someone says softly, brushing their teeth before bed. Oh? Their partner replies from another room. Yeah, not out loud, just mentally, like someone's listening. A beat of quiet. Maybe that someone is still you. Let that idea linger. Let the self you meet in silence hold your hand for a while. Not the self who pleases or impresses or explains, but the one who just is, No stage, no mirror, just breathe, just presence. Because soon we'll float deeper into the quiet distortion of memory, where every act of remembering reshapes the very thing we try to preserve, and once again, the self slips gently from its frame. The memory that rewrites itself. You remember it so vividly. The scent in the air, the shape of the light, the exact tremble in their voice as they said your name. You've told that story 100 times, each time certain of its truth. And yet, something shifts. A detail you forgot emerges suddenly. A feeling you were sure of now feels distant. Were they wearing blue that day? Or was it green? Neuroscience tells us what intuition has always whispered. Memory is not a vault, it's a canvas. Each act of remembering is not a replay, but a repainting. The original sketch fades beneath layers of reinterpretation. Emotions smudge the edges. Context changes the hue. Memory, far from static, breathes with us. It evolves as we evolve, quietly rewriting itself each time it's touched. A quiet conversation stirs in the dark. Wait, didn't your dad say that to you on your birthday? No. I think it was during that road trip. Or maybe both? Funny. I used to be sure. We build our identity upon these moments, these inner archives of who we were. But if those archives rewrite themselves, who exactly is doing the remembering? If the past is a story and the story keeps shifting, is the self just a narrator, forever editing the script? That ache you feel when recalling someone you loved, is it their memory or your longing shaping the tale? Maybe that's why old photographs feel strange. Not because we don't recognize ourselves, but because they trap a version of us that no longer exists, and maybe never did. In every retelling, we reframe the plot, sharpen the colors, add shadows where there were none. Sometimes we soften the pain, sometimes we deepen it. Memory is both balm and blade, and so the paradox hums. The more we remember, the less we remember truthfully. But is that a flaw or a gift? Perhaps we aren't meant to carry the past as a stone, but as water, fluid, changing, flowing through the present to nourish who we are now. Perhaps forgetting is not always failure. Perhaps distortion is a kind of forgiveness. Do you think we ever really remember anything exactly? I think we remember the feeling, and sometimes that's enough. So let the past blur like fog on a morning window. You touched it once. It's okay if it slips. The shape of what mattered is still with you, even if the edges have dissolved. And now, as we drift further, breathe softly, because the next paradox waits in the stillness, one that asks whether your death has already happened. The death already behind you. You're still here, breathing, listening. The quiet is soft, almost like a lullaby made of thought. But somewhere, a strange idea flickers beneath the calm. What if you've already died? Not in the dramatic, final way the world tends to imagine it, but in a quiet branch of reality, unnoticed, slipped into silence while this version of you continued on. Not because you're chosen, not because you're lucky, just because this timeline is the one where you survived. There's a theory, whispers from the corner of quantum physics. It says that every possible outcome unfolds in its own universe. Infinite forks. And in the strands where your heart stopped, where the accident wasn't avoided, where the diagnosis was worse, you no longer exist. But here, this one, it's still running. You're still breathing. So perhaps the you that listens now is already a ghost of what could have been lost. Did you ever think one voice says softly, resting elbows on the cafe counter. That maybe you've already used up your last life? The other stirs their tea, watching the tiny whirlpool form. I do wonder. Sometimes I get this chill, like something was supposed to end, but didn't. And in that swirl of steam and memory, the paradox sharpens. If we live only in timelines where we survive, then to ourselves, we're immortal. To everything else, we're gone many times over. It's a strange comfort and a quiet grief. So how do we live when death may have already passed us? Do we run from it faster or walk more slowly, savoring each crack in the sidewalk, each accidental kindness? Maybe this life is borrowed, or maybe it's overpaid. Either way, the thread you're walking now is thin, but it's here, and perhaps that's enough. The light in the room dims just slightly as evening deepens. Not a dramatic shift, just the kind of change you only notice when everything else is still. Someone gently taps your shoulder, not to rush you, but to ask, "Hey, you okay to keep going? Or need a moment to just sit?" You nod, or maybe you don't. But the question hangs there like a hammock, wide enough to rest in. Because if this strand of life is the one that continued, what will you do with it? And more tenderly, what will it do with you? Let your breath find you again, like a familiar path in the dark. We're almost there. The next thought will take us somewhere softer still, a place where the mind no longer pushes, but simply is, where being replaces doing, where thinking can exhale. And you, whichever version of you this is, are invited to stay. The thought that dissolves in silence. It begins as it always does, an itch in the mind, a question, a concept forming like mist. You reach for it with thought, shape it with analysis, hold it under the microscope of reason. You believe that thinking will bring you clarity. But what if the deeper truth waits after the last thought fades? There's a silence we rarely meet. Not the kind that's merely the absence of noise, but the stillness that arrives when the voice in your head no longer narrates. This silence doesn't feel empty. It feels alive, spacious, as though the world is breathing through you instead of being observed by you. In Eastern traditions, Zen, Advaita, certain schools of Tibetan Buddhism, this space is sacred. It's called presence, awareness, or simply being. And in recent branches of psychology and neuroscience, the idea echoes: mindfulness, flow states, and the quiet that comes when cognitive overdrive shuts down. The science may differ, but the experience is strangely the same. A sense that understanding isn't always thought. Sometimes it's felt. Have you ever had that moment, she asks softly, where you're just sitting, not doing anything, not even thinking, and somehow you get it? You can't explain what it is, but you feel it, like your body knows something your mind hasn't caught up to. He nods, blinking slowly. Yeah, it's like the world makes sense, not in words, but in rhythm. Like the trees don't need reasons to sway. They just do. When the internal monologue fades, what remains? If your identity is mostly thoughts, memories, labels, to-do lists, then what's left when the mind goes still? Are you still there? And strangely, that answer might be yes, perhaps more so than ever. Some truths cannot be spoken. They reveal themselves in silence, like the stars that only show when the sky forgets the sun. Thought is a tool, sharp and clever, but silence is the canvas, the ocean before the wave, the breath before the word. Maybe this is why monks sit for hours, staring at blank walls, why artists lose track of time, why sometimes you stand before a sunset and forget your name. These are not accidents. These are invitations. So let your mind rest. Let it curl in on itself like a leaf at dusk. Let thought dissolve like sugar in warm tea. Because just ahead lies something stranger than thought. A mirror that reflects not your face, but your essence. The mirror that lies truthfully. It's quiet. The kind of quiet where the hum of your own body becomes a sound. You stand in front of the mirror, not to admire, not to correct, just to look. But the longer you look, the more unsure you become. Is that really you? A face, familiar, expected, but strangely distant, like seeing someone you once knew in a dream you barely remember. The mirror offers its truth without hesitation. Yet truth here might not mean clarity. It might mean illusion wearing honesty's clothes. There's a strange thing about mirrors. They don't show what others see. They don't even show what you see. They show what your mind believes you should be seeing. That belief is stitched together with old voices, filtered through mornings of tired eyes and nights of practiced smiles. One tilt of the head, one different emotion, and the reflection bends, not physically, but meaningfully. Is it weird? Someone once asked, brushing lint from their jacket in the elevator. That I only recognize myself in certain lights? The other person, without looking up from their phone, replied, "Not weird, just human." And that was enough. A mirror moment. Fleeting, ordinary, heavy. Psychologists say your self-image is less a photo and more a collage, a composite of emotion, memory, social feedback, and deep-seated myths about who you think you are. That means on some days, the mirror tells a lie that feels like truth, and on others, a truth that feels like betrayal. Like when someone compliments you and you don't know how to receive it. I don't see what they see, you think. But maybe that's the point. What you see is a story, rehearsed in silence, a mask carefully painted over years, not with vanity, but with survival. This is who I've had to be, says the mask. And sometimes, that mask gets mistaken for a mirror. In soft hotel lighting, someone once whispered to no one in particular, "I look more like myself when I'm far from home." As if the self was something that traveled lightly, shedding weight with each mile. That version, the one the mirror rarely captures, felt more real, more raw, more allowed. And so we arrive at the paradox. The mirror doesn't lie by distorting. It lies by reflecting too faithfully. It shows the surface, untouched by the soul beneath. But even that lie tells a deeper truth of how we've learned to see, and sometimes to not look too closely. Let the image blur. Let the outlines soften. Not because you're broken, but because your reflection was never meant to be a verdict, only a sketch, a beginning, not a summary. And now, as the mirror fades gently into the background, we prepare for the next mystery. One not shaped by what we build for ourselves, but by what the world quietly hands us without our asking. Close your eyes. The glass holds no power here. The name that became you. Before you spoke your first word, before you formed a thought of your own, someone named you. A sound was chosen, by family, by tradition, perhaps even by accident, but it stuck, and somehow it stuck to you. Over time, it became a hook that the world used to pull you into focus. That's your name, they said. But what they didn't say was this: that's who you'll become. Names are more than identification. They're quiet architects. Each syllable carries echoes of history, of language, of values whispered across generations. You didn't choose it, yet it began shaping how others saw you, how they called you, how they reacted to you, and in turn, how you reacted to yourself. Like the invisible current beneath a boat, it steers you even when the surface looks still. Linguists speak of linguistic relativity, the theory that language doesn't just describe reality, but creates it. So what happens when your name, a single word, becomes the filter through which you interpret who you are? Maybe you became softer because your name sounded gentle. Maybe you tried harder because your name belonged to someone successful. Or maybe, somewhere deep down, you felt like your name never fit and lived your whole life as if wearing the wrong skin. "I've always wondered," said a voice in the dark, "if I would have grown up differently if my name weren't so serious." "Serious?" the other replied, amused. "Like what?" "Like stern. It made teachers expect maturity, and I played along." A soft silence passed between them. "So, would you still be you if they had named you something playful?" "Maybe I'd laugh louder, or maybe I'd never have learned to keep so much inside." That's the paradox. The name feels like you, and yet it came from them. It's the most personal word in your world, yet it arrived without your consent. You answer to it, dream under it, sign it at the bottom of every truth you declare. But what if it's just a costume, a sound that trained you to behave a certain way until the performance felt real? So, close your eyes for a moment. Let the name fall away. Don't answer to it. Don't even think in terms of it. Imagine walking into a room where no one knows what to call you. Who are you now? A breath? A presence? A rhythm without a label? In that nameless space, something ancient stirs. Because what's coming next will ask you to forget more than just your name. It will ask, what if this isn't your first time being someone at all? The echo of lives. You don't remember. There are moments that don't fit. A scent in the stairwell that stirs longing. A street corner that fills your chest with grief, though you've never walked it before. A stranger's voice that feels like an unfinished sentence in your soul. You tell yourself it's just coincidence. But part of you wonders, what if it's not? Some call it déjà vu. Others feel it in the strange gravity between two people whose lives just missed each other. It's in the fear you can't explain, the comfort you never earned, the sorrow that doesn't seem to belong to you. Maybe, just maybe, it does. But not to this version of you. To one that came before. Across continents and centuries, the idea that we return, again and again, has survived in whispers and prayers. Reincarnation, a soul recycling its way through skin and time. The Buddhist speaks of karma unfolding like petals. A child in rural Turkey recites the life of a pilot she never knew. A war veteran wakes screaming in a language he never learned. Science frowns, but not too hard. Even skeptics admit the mind has tunnels it hasn't mapped. In a quiet cafe, one person leans toward another. You ever feel like you've done this before? The other smiles, slow and thoughtful. Not exactly, but sometimes I know what someone's going to say, like I'm remembering their words before they speak. A fork clinks. A song plays in the background. And just for a second, the world feels like a rerun you didn't know you'd seen. Neuroscience might call it a pattern glitch, a loop in the brain where familiarity gets misfiled. Maybe that's true. Or maybe the soul has muscle memory. Maybe your eyes flinch before a moment that hurt, lifetimes ago. And if that's so, what have you brought with you into this life? A lesson half learned? A wound unhealed? A promise left dangling in the wind? Or perhaps your deepest longings aren't born from this life at all. They're echoes, reverberations from before the curtain rose. The person you miss might be someone you were. The mistake you keep making might be karma tapping its foot. It's a soft burden, isn't it? The idea that who you are now is only the surface, and somewhere deep beneath, other versions of you, wiser, sadder, bolder, are still speaking, still shaping. A train passes in the distance. Your breath syncs with its rhythm. A voice beside you says, "Funny. I dreamed this exact moment once," and you nod, because something inside you knew too. Let the echoes settle now. Not everything must be remembered to be real. Some things hum quietly, like lullabies sung to a child who no longer knows the words, but still sleeps more peacefully for them. Next, we follow the echo to its strangest twist yet. What if the future isn't waiting ahead, but already hiding somewhere behind you, ready to be remembered? Remembering the future. It starts in a whisper, a flicker of déjà vu. You're walking down a street you've never seen, yet somehow you know the red mailbox will be crooked. You finish someone's sentence, not because you're guessing, but because you've already heard it, somewhere deep in the folds of silence. These aren't accidents. They feel like fragments of a dream you haven't had yet. Or maybe a memory, but not from the past. A soft voice drifts in a dim room. Have you ever known something before it happened? Yeah, the other replies, hesitant. But I always assumed it was coincidence. What if it wasn't? Then, what was it? A memory, the first says, but of something that hasn't happened yet. The idea sounds impossible at first, like trying to hold smoke in your hands. But some physicists say time isn't a line we walk, it's a block we live inside. The block universe theory suggests that every moment, your first breath, your last heartbeat, your next thought, is already stitched into the fabric of existence. The entire timeline sits there, whole and unmoving. Past, present, and future are simply coordinates, not flow. In that view, your experience of time is just that. Experience. A limitation of biology. Like reading a book line by line when all the pages already exist. Maybe you feel echoes of the future because your mind brushes against a page it hasn't read aloud yet. This doesn't mean fate is a prison. It means your perception might be a keyhole. And once in a while, in the liminal space between sleep and waking, between now and next, something slips through. A shimmer, a face you haven't met, a choice you haven't made, but already did. You don't know how you know. You just remember. There's something hauntingly tender about this idea. Because if the future can whisper backwards, maybe you're not merely moving forward in time. You're orbiting something. A truth you already hold. A version of yourself that is waiting for you like a familiar coat in a forgotten closet. But if the future is already written, one voice murmurs, do we really choose anything? Maybe we don't choose by changing the future, the other says gently. Maybe we choose by changing how we meet it. So memory becomes a map or a mirror, comes the answer, reflecting what you're still becoming. And just like that, the weight of time loosens. It's no longer a ticking march forward, but a spiral. You may feel moments twice, not because they repeat, but because they echo. So tonight, as you drift deeper into the dream space, let go of time as a straight line. Let it curl. Let it bend. Let it fold in on itself like soft fabric warmed by light. What you're becoming is already waiting in the folds, and what you remember may be the signal of a self already reaching back. Because up ahead, gently, something strange stirs. What if the dream isn't yours, because you are the dream? the dream that dreams you. You close your eyes, not to end the day, but to slip into something softer, a drifting, a dissolving. One breath at a time, the edges blur, and another world begins to form. But here's the question that floats in with the darkness. What if you're not falling into a dream, but being dreamed? It's an old thought, worn into the folds of philosophy, like a smooth stone passed from hand to hand. Descartes once wondered how we could ever know we're awake. He couldn't prove it. And somewhere far from the candlelit corners of Europe, sages in saffron robes whispered something even deeper, that the you asking the question might be part of the dream itself. A thought flickering in the vast mind of something vaster, not the dreamer, but the dreamed. Hey, a voice nudges you in the calm, like someone brushing past on a quiet train. Have you ever felt like your whole life is someone else's memory? The question lands softly, like dust on a windowsill. Sometimes, you whisper, like I'm watching a story I can't pause. And neither of you rush to answer, because some questions aren't waiting for answers. They're waiting for surrender. In some traditions, the self is likened to a reflection on a lake, so clear, so real, until the surface ripples. Then, you're not sure if you ever saw your face at all, or just the sky pretending to be you. And maybe that's the ache you've always carried, not knowing if you're the water or the light dancing across it. But this illusion, it hurts. It laughs. It stumbles and weeps and holds grudges in the rain. Can an illusion love? Can it break? Can it miss someone at midnight with a kind of homesickness that no map could cure? And if you're the dreamed, not the dreamer, why does the ache feel holy? Someone once said, quietly over 2 mugs of lukewarm tea, I think pain means we exist, even if we're not real the way we think we are. The other person didn't answer, just passed the sugar, and for a second, their eyes shimmered like they'd seen the same dream. So where does that leave us? You are the wind moving through a story, the breath before a line is spoken, the hush between 2 scenes, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Maybe that's the miracle. The imagined still feels. The unreal still loves. Let that idea rest with you, not to solve it, but to be cradled by it, as if some great gentle mind is thinking of you right now, not in judgment, not in fear, just in quiet awe of the fact that you exist at all. Because next, we'll wander into a stranger landscape, one where the only tool you have is the very thing you're trying to transcend, the mind trying to unthink itself. The trap of self-awareness. You catch yourself thinking again, not just thinking, but thinking about thinking. You notice a feeling rise, you question it. Then you question the questioning. A spiral, so gentle it almost feels like floating, until suddenly, it doesn't. It feels tight, like a room made of reflections, and each wall only leads you back to yourself. Why do I always overthink everything? A quiet voice beside you asks. Because you want to be better, someone replies. But better than what? And no one answers. Self-awareness, we're told, is the key to growth. To wake up from autopilot. To understand ourselves is to master our lives. But what happens when the observer becomes too sharp, too constant, like a flashlight that never turns off, even in sleep? The mind becomes its own project. You notice your flaws and you try to fix them, but the noticing becomes part of the flaw. You meditate, then wonder if you're meditating correctly. You feel anxious, then feel ashamed for feeling anxious. Each attempt to escape the cage forges a new bar. It's like standing in a room full of mirrors. At first, the reflections seem helpful. You fix your collar, you adjust your posture, but then every turn reveals another version of you watching, judging, calculating. You can't walk out. You are the room. I just want to be at peace, you say. Then let go, the other voice says. But am I letting go right? Silence. This is the paradox of inner work. The more you polish the self, the more smudges you see. The more effort you make to release control, the more tightly you're gripping. Even surrender becomes a task. Even stillness becomes a performance. Like a snake trying to shed its skin, only to find more underneath. Are we trapped? Not in our flaws, but in our gaze upon them. Awareness folds inward like paper again and again until the original page disappears. Consciousness trying to fix consciousness is like a hand trying to grasp itself. It can point, it can curl, but it cannot escape its own shape. So maybe the answer isn't to escape the mirrors, but to let them fog, to stop asking if we're awake or asleep, right or wrong, healing or broken. Maybe awareness isn't about solving the self, but softening around it. Do you think we're overthinking this? Almost certainly. They laugh, not because they've solved it, but because they've stopped trying to. Let the mirrors blur. Let the mind stop chasing itself in circles. Because what comes next is not another insight, not another answer, but a silence so full, it begins to speak. The silence that says everything. A breeze outside brushes the window. The room is still. No music, no dialogue, just the hush that settles when even your thoughts begin to pause. And yet, in that quiet, something speaks. It's not a voice, not a word, but it says more than language ever could. There's a kind of communication that doesn't need sound. The way a parent holds a child and says nothing, but says everything. The way a sunset presses against your chest and leaves you breathless, with no sentence formed. There, in the pauses, meaning blooms like fog at dawn, soft, shapeless, but undeniably real. In spiritual circles, silence isn't seen as a void. It's a presence, a kind of full emptiness, the moment between the inhale and the exhale when time softens and you suddenly remember you're alive. Two strangers sit in a waiting room. One of them glances up. "You can hear the building hum," she says. The other smiles. "I think it's us humming back." They don't speak after that. They just sit. The silence between them somehow more intimate than an hour of small talk. Words are tools, but they're clumsy. They fracture experience into categories and names. They slice the world into manageable pieces. But some things can't be sliced. Some truths are too fluid, too wide. They shimmer at the edges of sentences, but slip away when we try to explain them. Maybe that's why deep meditation feels like falling inwards, not falling asleep. Falling into stillness, into the space behind your name, your plans, your thoughts. A space where the mind stops trying to build and just listens. You don't need to be a monk to feel it. Sometimes it's there on the subway when no one is talking and everyone is just being. Or when you lie awake in the dark and there's nothing left to solve. Just the breath, just the stillness, just the you that is always there beneath the noise. A child once asked his grandfather, "What's your favorite sound?" The old man leaned back and whispered, "The one just after the rain stops." That's the paradox. That silence, often feared as emptiness, is actually full. It holds what language can't. It lets feelings grow without pushing them. It lets the self soften without needing to explain itself. Maybe the most honest version of you isn't the one who always has something to say. Maybe it's the one who simply stays with the moment, with the breath, with the silence. Let that quiet carry you. Let it fill the spaces where worry used to echo. Because next, we walk toward the edge, where identity dissolves, and what's left might not be nothing. It might be everything. The self that melts into all things. Have you ever watched fog roll over a valley, blurring the lines between tree, sky, and earth until everything becomes one? There's a peace in that, when the world forgets where one thing ends and another begins. Now imagine if the same could happen to you. Not your body dissolving, not in pain or absence, but your sense of boundary. The invisible wall that says, "Here is me. There is not me." What if that wall was never real, just scaffolding, temporary? A child's drawing of a castle in the sand, sharp edges that vanish with the tide. In many mystical traditions, from the Vedic hymns of India to the silent teachings of Zen, there is a story told without words, that what you think you are is not what you truly are. They speak of ego death, not destruction, but softening, a melting. When the voice inside your head that says, "mine" and "I" and "this is who I am" goes silent, and something vast flows in to take its place. Modern neuroscience nods in quiet agreement. There's a part of your brain, the default mode network, that lights up when you reflect on yourself, your past, your plans, your identity. But in deep meditation, or during moments of intense awe, or under the influence of psychedelics, this network goes dim, and with it, so does the story of you. That's when something unexpected happens. People report a sense of merging, as if their skin was never a boundary but a doorway, as if the trees and the stars and the strangers and the breeze were somehow inside them too. A unity, a oneness so complete, there's no word for it that doesn't feel too small. "Hey," one voice murmurs in the half-light of a bedroom. "Have you ever had that weird feeling? Like you're everything and nothing all at once?" The other laughs softly, tucking the blanket under their chin. "You mean like when you're watching the sky and suddenly feel like the sky is watching you back?" "Yeah, that. Like the border between me and not me just melts." "I get it," comes the quiet reply. "It's scary, but beautiful. Like falling into the ocean and realizing you were water all along. And that is the paradox. We spend our lives building the self, polishing it, defending it, naming it. But the deepest peace comes not from perfecting that self, but from surrendering it. You don't disappear, you dissolve, like salt in warm water. Still there, but everywhere. And in that everywhere, you are no longer alone. You are not just you. You are the sunlight on someone's cheek, the laughter echoing in another's chest, the quiet comfort in a stranger's tears. All of it. One movement. So now lie back. Let your breath become the ocean's tide. Let the sense of me grow quiet. Because up ahead, we ask the next question. If everything you were is gone, then what still listens in the silence that remains? The identity that disappears when you look for it. You close your eyes and wonder, who exactly is doing the wondering? Is it the voice in your head? The memories you replay like old home videos? The habits, the tastes, the wounds? But when you try to reach past all of that to something essential, it slips, like trying to catch fog with a net made of thought. The more precise the grasp, the quicker it dissolves. There's a word in Buddhist thought for this, anatta, no self. Not no personality or no feeling, but no solid core behind it all. The ancient texts say the self is not an object, but a mirage, stitched together moment by moment from perception, memory, and expectation. Modern neuroscience seems to nod in agreement. The you feel is real, is a kind of performance, the brain's ongoing narrative, a role you play so convincingly you forget it was a role. Earlier today, two strangers sat across from one another on a slow-moving train. One wore a faded red sweater, the other a slate gray coat. One asked, "Do you think people ever change completely?" The other paused, sipped their tea, and said, "I think we just wake up from older versions of ourselves, like stepping out of a coat that doesn't fit anymore." Then the train curved into a tunnel, and the windows turned black. And maybe that's what identity is, a coat, not false, but temporary, not fake, but shaped by the season. You wear a new one for a new chapter, but underneath, there's no final skin, no last layer, only breath, presence, space. It's a terrifying kind of freedom, this absence of a center, no self to defend, no villain to punish, no fixed place to plant your flag and say, "This is me," forever. But there's a softness to it too. If there's no permanent you, maybe there's nothing to fail, nothing to prove. You're not broken. You're changing. Always were. And when someone asks, "Why are you quiet tonight?" you don't need a reason. Maybe you just weren't the same person who had something to say yesterday. Maybe today, silence fits better. Somewhere, in the stillness between questions and answers, between the inhale and the letting go, you might notice a strange peace, not because you found yourself, but because you stopped needing to. So breathe into that space now, that gentle, shifting openness where a solid I used to sit. Let it widen like a sky with no edge, because next, we ask a question with no map, no compass, only wonder. If you could live forever, would you still be you? The immortal that forgets itself. Close your eyes, let your breath soften. Now imagine this. You never die. Time becomes a ribbon that never ends, unraveling into forever. At first it feels like freedom. No goodbyes, no endings, no fear of loss. Just you, endless, alive. But then the centuries begin to stack. Millennia gather like fallen leaves. And with each passing eon, something strange happens. You forget. Not all at once, but quietly, imperceptibly. A laugh that once echoed through your chest is now just a vibration you can't quite place. The face of someone you once loved becomes a blur in a crowd you can't name. The language you spoke in your youth fades into something unfamiliar. And you, who once held memories like stones in your pocket, now find them slipping through like sand. "I used to love painting," you might whisper one evening. "Still do?" someone asks, pouring tea beside you in the quiet dusk. You pause. "I don't know. I think I did. Or maybe that was someone else." They smile gently. "Maybe you're both." Immortality, once imagined as permanence, begins to feel like a slow unraveling. Without the boundaries of death to define you, your story starts to stretch too thin. Your personality, once a sharp outline, softens into watercolor. Who you were becomes a ghost haunting the halls of who you are now. Neuroscience tells us even in a normal human life, memory is fluid. We remember things differently over time. Some moments get rewritten, others vanish. Now imagine that process unfolding not over decades, but over millennia. The you of today becomes a stranger to the you of 1,000 years ago. You change not just gradually, but completely, over and over. And yet, you still call yourself I. But what does that mean anymore? You are still living, but are you still you? This is the paradox of eternity. It offers time without end, but chips away at the very self who receives it. like a candle that doesn't go out, but melts slowly into its own wax. Immortality isn't an escape from death. It is a different kind of disappearance. And yet, even as the self dissolves, something lingers. A pulse, a thread, a quiet awareness humming underneath it all. Maybe identity was never the point. Maybe what lasts isn't the name or the memory, but the space in which those things once moved. So when someone asks, "Who are you?" and you can no longer answer with a story, maybe the silence is its own kind of truth. Let that silence stretch now. Let time become wide, for in the next breath we'll spiral into something older than memory itself. An idea that may not have started with you and may not need you to survive. The thought that thinks you. It starts quietly, just a thought arriving like dew on glass, soft, unnoticed. It whispers something familiar, something that feels like you. But what if it isn't? What if thought isn't yours at all? A woman in the cafe stirs her tea 3 times before taking a sip. Across from her, her friend pauses mid-sentence. "Why do you always do that?" The woman shrugs, half smiling. "My grandmother used to. I don't know. It just feels right." But what feels right? Who decides that? Thoughts, like stories, have ancestors. They arrive with a lineage you rarely question. The phrases you repeat, the instincts you obey, the rules that live in you like old songs you never remember learning. Some scientists call them memes, cultural viruses that evolve through imitation, spreading like wind-borne seeds. They don't need your permission. They just need your attention. A catchy jingle, a ritual, a phrase that climbs inside and refuses to leave. There's a strange intimacy in realizing your inner world might be rented space. That belief, preference, identity, they may not have been born in you, but through you. A dream that passes from sleeper to sleeper, each thinking they were the first to dream it. And maybe that's why it's so hard to pin down who you really are. Because the thoughts you think may not be thinking, they may be thinking you. The boy on the train turns to the stranger beside him and asks, "Do you ever get a song stuck in your head you haven't heard in years?" The man nods. "Sometimes I don't even know if I heard it, or just invented it." They both look forward again, the silence humming between them, filled with something neither of them invited. Thought is not always a tool. Sometimes it's the current, and you're just the leaf. It loops and loops until you forget who dropped into whom first. And if that's true, then identity is not a solid shape but a shifting field, a place where ideas go to survive. You are not the painter. You're the canvas, touched by pigments older than your birth. The self becomes a gallery of passing minds. So rest. Let the thoughts drift without needing to keep them. Let them flow through, like birds across the sky, none of them yours to keep, yet all of them passing through you. Because next, we begin to wonder if the floor you're standing on, the very ground of your knowing, was never there at all. The reality that slips when touched. There's a quiet trust we place in the world around us. The feel of the floor beneath your feet, the way light dances across a familiar room, the softness of a pillow that welcomes your head at night. These are the things we rarely question, because questioning them feels like standing on ice and asking how thick it really is. But even the gentlest doubt begins to melt that surface. Imagine sitting in your room. You reach out and place your hand on the table. It feels solid, firm, reliable. But beneath your skin, beneath the wood, lies a world of atoms. And atoms, as physics reminds us, are mostly space. They're not packed like bricks. They're vast fields of possibility, held together by invisible forces. So when you touch the table, what you're really feeling isn't thing, but resistance. Not contact, but the illusion of it. Isn't that weird? One voice says softly in the dark. What is? The other replies, eyes half closed. That everything you touch, you never really touch. It's just your electrons saying, no closer, like shadows pretending to be solid. A silence passes between them, not uneasy, just thoughtful. The brain, too, is a master of magic. It doesn't show you the world as it is, it shows you a painting, one stitched together from light waves, pressure pulses, electrical whispers between neurons. The brain simulates reality so seamlessly that we call it real. But if you were to pause long enough, to look closely enough, it would begin to shimmer. Not vanish, but tremble. There's a name for this trembling. Some call it derealization. Others call it awakening. Either way, it's the same sensation. The floor beneath you is still there, but it's no longer beneath. It's floating, contextless, just one layer of dream atop another. Sometimes, the second voice says, I stare at my hands and feel like I'm wearing a costume, like the world is playing itself for me. Yeah, the first murmurs. Or through you, like you're not the player or the audience, just the screen. And this is where the paradox comes in like fog over a lake. The more we trust what we see and touch, the safer we feel. But that safety is built on layers of perception, not certainty. What if solidity is just a trick of scale? What if color is just the brain's translation of meaningless wavelengths? What if reality, as we know it, is only real because we've never dared to ask otherwise? To think that what feels most solid may be the most fragile is like realizing the house you live in is made of paper and the rain has just begun. But don't panic. Don't cling. Let it soften. Because maybe realness was never meant to be a wall. Maybe it's a veil, and behind it, something wider, quieter, stranger, and more loving than you expected. As your thoughts slow and your sense of certainty flickers like a candle's last breath, ask yourself not what is real, but what remains when reality lets go. Because next, we descend into another paradox, one that doesn't ask what is, but why. The search for meaning begins in a universe that may be utterly, beautifully silent. The meaning that invents itself. There's a quiet ache that moves through us, often unnamed. It rises in the stillness between tasks, in the soft hush after laughter fades. A question not asked aloud, yet constantly lived. What is all this for? And beneath that, like a tide under the skin, am I enough for it to matter? Two people sit on a city bench, paper coffee cups steaming in their hands. One glances at the clouds and says, almost as if to himself, "Do you think it has to mean something? Everything we do?" The other smiles gently, eyes soft. "I think it means whatever makes your chest rise differently when you think of it." The universe doesn't reply, not to whispered prayers, not to existential monologues beneath starlight. It stays silent, immeasurably vast, immeasurably indifferent. And yet, here you are, breathing into that silence, naming things, loving, hoping, choosing to care in a place that never asked you to. Sartre once suggested that life has no meaning the moment you're born, but every moment after, you're painting it. Not with colors that were handed down, but with the ones you mixed yourself, sometimes clumsily, sometimes beautifully, often both. So you find yourself inventing rituals that feel sacred, even if no God wrote them. You wake up early to watch a sunrise no one else will witness. You say thank you, to a moment that passed quietly but meant something. You offer kindness not because the cosmos demands it, but because something inside you insists it's worth doing. And that's the strange magic of it. Meaning, when not found, becomes forged. When it isn't given, it becomes chosen. And when it's chosen, it becomes yours in a way nothing inherited ever could. But even here, a paradox lingers in the shadows. If the meaning you live by is entirely self-created, does that make it fragile or infinitely adaptable? Can something be both an illusion and essential? A woman tells a story at dinner, her voice calm, her smile faint. She says her son used to line up pebbles in the exact same way every morning before school. One day she asked him why. He shrugged and said, "Because it makes the day go better." And that was enough, for him, and maybe for us. It's not always about grand visions or legacy etched in stone. Sometimes, meaning is the softness of worn-out shoes that carried you through the worst days. The warmth of a phrase only one person knows how to say to you. The comfort in making your own rituals where once there was emptiness. So if this life has no pre-written purpose, maybe that's a relief. You're not failing to find it. You're simply free to build it. Let that thought rest with you, gentle and unhurried. You don't need to solve the question. You're already living the answer in quiet, invisible ways. Now breathe. Let your mind quiet. Because next, we'll step even deeper into a secret you might not have written, but still wear like a second skin. The values that weren't yours to choose. You believe in honesty, you strive for compassion, you fight for justice, or maybe for order. But late at night, when the world is quiet and no one is watching, do you ever wonder where those beliefs actually came from? It starts before memory. Before you had words, there were voices. A parent's quiet approval, a teacher's reprimand, a cultural ritual wrapped in music and celebration. You absorbed them the way skin absorbs sunlight. Passively, completely. You didn't choose the lessons. They settled into your bones like warm milk, like lullabies whispered in a language you didn't yet understand. Even now, it's hard to tell where you begin and where they end. You say you value freedom, but was that your voice? Or the echo of a flag waving over every classroom you ever sat in? You cherish discipline, but whose fear does that serve? Sometimes even rebellion wears the fingerprints of the very systems it seeks to undo, like a puppet resisting its strings, still dancing to the tension of the pull. I've always believed in fairness, one voice says. But always, another replies. Or was it just the only story you were allowed to hear? There's a long pause between them, the kind that stretches through generations. Maybe it's both. The first voice whispers, "Maybe I chose," from a shelf that was stocked before I arrived. We are shaped by what we're born into. Religion, schooling, media. The rules are written in ink that's already dry when we learn to read. And when we finally begin to question them, it feels less like choice and more like trying to repaint a house without knowing what color lies underneath. Still, there's power in doubt, in realizing that some of your deepest convictions might be inherited costumes, and that doesn't make them worthless. It makes them known, examined, alive. Because maybe authenticity isn't about carving something entirely new, but about gently peeling back the layers to see what still rings true beneath the noise. Let yourself sit with that, not to tear your values down, but to hold them like fragile glass under sunlight. Let them shimmer in uncertainty. Let them breathe. Because that's where something new might be born. Not from certainty, but from the quiet courage to admit, This might not have been mine, but it could be now. And now, as the thought softens like wind slipping through curtains, we drift into a quieter paradox still. What happens when you try to be good, even when no one is watching? The morality that acts alone. The hallway was quiet, no applause, no eyes watching, and still, your hand reached out to pick up the fallen cup someone else had dropped. Was it habit, upbringing, or something deeper, something that doesn't need an audience to breathe? In the stillness where no praise echoes and no one's counting, a quiet question drifts in. Does goodness exist if no one ever knows? You might have heard of the ancient story, the one about a ring that makes you invisible. No judgment, no punishment, absolute freedom. The question buried inside that myth isn't about power. It's about who you become when no one is looking. Two people sit across from each other on a late train. One glances at the other and says softly, "You dropped this." There's no reward, no Instagram post, just a return, a kindness, and then silence again. Sometimes the most human thing happens in the absence of any reaction. We're taught that virtue shines brightest in the spotlight, but what if it glows more truly in the dark? What if your finest choices leave no footprints? In a world flooded with tracking, scoring, reviewing, how strange it feels to do good without proof. Yet some of the deepest ethics bloom in obscurity, not because they must, but because they can. A man once held open a door for someone who never came. He waited, then let it close. No one saw. But that pause, however brief, held a kind of sacred rhythm, a gesture for its own sake, a soft rebellion against selfish logic. There's a weight to this kind of goodness. It doesn't sing, it doesn't advertise, but it hums beneath the skin like a forgotten lullaby. If the universe never records your gesture, did it still shape you? Someone might say, why bother if no one knows? Another might answer, because I do. And maybe that's the quiet center of this paradox, not the act or the outcome, but the subtle shift in who you become by doing it. Like brushing dust off an old piano, the note may never be played again, but still, you brushed it, because it was yours to care for. Let this goodness linger, soft and scentless, unclaimed, unnamed, unneeded, and still entirely real. Because as you settle deeper now, we're about to drift into another kind of choice, the decision to walk away, not out of fear, but out of tenderness. The compassion of looking away. Some truths knock gently and others kick the door down. We're taught to meet them all with open eyes, to be brave, to be honest, to stare directly into suffering as if that act alone redeems it. But what if, just once, the kindest gesture is to look away? In a quiet apartment, a dim lamp glows. A father gently closes the door before his child sees a weeping mother. He doesn't lie. He simply shields. In another room, two friends sit across from each other. One has just lost something precious. The other senses it but doesn't press. There is no interrogation, no digging into the wound, only warmth in the silence and the subtle gift of space. Should I have said something? I don't know. Maybe saying nothing was everything. There are moments when the full weight of truth, unveiled too quickly, can crush rather than free. Like a flower forced open before its time, even truth needs permission to bloom gently. Therapists know this. They hold silence like a soft bowl, not rushing to fill it with explanations. Some things do not heal because they're seen. Some heal only when they're allowed to rest in shadow until the soul is ready. Parents often tell half-truths to children, not out of deception, but because love sometimes speaks in ellipses. It chooses what to reveal with care, like shielding a flame from wind until it's strong enough to burn steady. And haven't you too spared someone the cruel clarity of a moment because you knew, deep down, they weren't ready? Or maybe you weren't ready. Is that cowardice or compassion? We tend to glorify brutal honesty, but love has other faces. It knows when to close its eyes, not in fear, but in mercy. Because not all exposure is light. Sometimes it scorches. And so we dim the glare, not to hide, but to soften. And then comes the paradox. That very act of turning away can either wound or soothe. Avoidance can be violence, yes, when truth is needed and withheld, but it can also be the gentlest form of protection. It all depends on what we're shielding and why. A pause is not always a denial. A curtain drawn is not always a refusal. Sometimes it's an intermission, a breath between acts. And in that breath, there's room to feel without collapsing, to be held without explanation. Do you think they knew I wasn't ready to hear it? Maybe. Or maybe they loved you enough not to make you prove it. So let the curtain rest, not in shame, but in softness. Let the moment remain unspoken, just for now. Because next, we enter a deeper paradox, when knowing changes nothing, and yet changes everything. The inaction. That isn't indifference. You saw it, the conversation veering toward harm, the door left unlocked, the coworker being quietly humiliated in the corner of a meeting room, your breath caught, your chest tensed, but your hands never moved. Was that cruelty? Or was it the weight of knowing how brittle things can be when touched? Some say morality is motion, doing, fixing, standing up. But what if sometimes the most conscious choice is the one that stays still? Not from apathy, not from fear, but from a subtler kind of care, as if you understood too deeply what movement might cost. Two people sit quietly on a late bus. One glances out the window, the other leans forward. You saw that, didn't you? I did. Why didn't we? I think it would have made things worse. You felt that too? I wasn't sure. But yes. There is a tension between knowing and interfering. Some dilemmas are like webs. You pull one thread and the whole design collapses. You may recognize pain, feel it ripple through the air like static before a storm. And still, stepping in might only draw more lightning. Psychologists call this diffusion of responsibility, but that's not always the right story. Sometimes it's not about passing the buck. It's about carrying it in silence. You hear someone crying in a public bathroom stall. You pause outside. You want to speak. You want to comfort. But your voice might intrude where privacy has become refuge. You walk away, not because you don't care, but because you care so much you're willing to be misunderstood. That's the paradox. We mistake stillness for stone-heartedness, but stillness can be full of trembling, full of weight, like a doctor refusing a treatment that would do more harm than good, like a mother not calling her child back when he walks away, because the lesson needs space. Even in war, there are moments where not pulling the trigger is the deepest act of courage. Isn't it strange how action shouts, but inaction listens? A friend once said, "I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing." And the silence was not empty. It was thick with respect, with boundaries, with unspeakable gentleness. Words would have shattered something. We live in a world that demands movement, hashtags, calls to arms. But not all moments are calls. Some are invitations to wait. So tonight, if there's something you didn't do, some step you didn't take, don't rush to label it weakness. It might have been a whisper of wisdom, the kind that holds space without filling it. Let inaction sit beside you. Let it lean gently against your shoulder, not as guilt, but as shadow, not as failure, but as pause. It has its own quiet dignity, because soon we'll face another kind of paradox, one where truth itself might be too sharp to speak, and kindness may mean turning the truth into silence. The truth that cuts too deep. There is a kind of silence that falls after certain truths are spoken. Not the peaceful kind, but a raw, shivering stillness, as if the soul itself has been scraped by something too sharp to touch. We're taught from childhood that honesty is a virtue, that truth sets us free. But what happens when the truth doesn't liberate, but lacerates? When it doesn't heal, but hollows? You've likely felt it before. A friend blurting out something, just being honest, unaware or uncaring that their truth was a weight you weren't ready to hold. Or maybe you've been on the other side, holding a truth so heavy that when you finally dropped it, it shattered something in someone else. We like to believe that truth is inherently good, that it stands apart from harm, but truth is not air, it's metal, and like metal, it can be forged into keys or knives. The difference is intent and timing. I didn't mean to hurt you, someone says, after letting their version of reality slice through yours. But it did hurt, comes the soft reply. 2 people, 2 hearts, 1 truth, delivered without rhythm, without warmth, without pause. That's the danger of truth when it's weaponized by impatience or ego. When we forget that understanding isn't just about what we say, but how we say it, and when. A medical diagnosis, if whispered too soon, can crush hope. An accusation, dropped in the wrong moment, becomes a fire that spreads. Even facts, clinical and cold, can become cruelty if stripped of compassion. Do you think it's always better to know? I used to, until I found out something I wish I hadn't. Would you rather have been lied to? No, but maybe I needed more time. Maybe I needed a gentler way in. Ethical honesty isn't about full exposure, it's about care, and care requires discernment. There are truths that grow bitter when forced before their ripeness, like fruit torn from the branch too soon. And just as a surgeon wields a scalpel with control and empathy, so too must we handle our truths with a steady, thoughtful hand. Because yes, the truth can cut deep, but it doesn't have to cut cruelly. This paradox lives in the tension between courage and mercy. Should we speak because it's real, or wait because it's kind? The art is not in hiding, but in holding, in knowing that sometimes silence is not a lie, but a pause, for breathing, for healing, for readiness. Even truth has a responsibility to the moment it arrives in. So let us let truth breathe. Let it step down from its pedestal of purity and enter the messy, emotional reality of human connection, not as a commandment, but as a companion, not as a weapon, but as a whisper. Because next, we turn to those who feel everything, yet say nothing. Those who watch suffering unfold and choose stillness, not from apathy, but from love. The burden of the silent witness. Sometimes the ache doesn't belong to you, but it finds a home in you anyway. You didn't shout, you didn't strike, you didn't turn the knife, but you saw it. You heard the pause after the slap. You noticed the way someone's voice dimmed like a candle that knew it wouldn't be lit again. And now, in the quiet, you carry something invisible, a strange, invisible inheritance, the sorrow of having been there. There's a particular ache that comes from being the one who watched, not the villain, not the savior, just there, and that just becomes the heaviest part. Sometimes it isn't cowardice that holds the body still. It's the way the moment fills every corner of the mind, all at once, too fast to name, too sharp to grasp. The brain freezes in the hallway between empathy and action. And by the time the door opens, the scene has moved on, leaving behind only the scent of "you should have." Two voices walk past on a rainy street. "Did you see that guy at the train station?" "Yeah. I wasn't sure what to do." "Me neither. I still think about it though." "I know. Me too. There's no blood on your hands, but memory has fingerprints. It presses on the inner walls of your thoughts, like wind pushing through an open window. A quiet insistence that you were part of something, even when you weren't doing anything. You might replay it, trying to rewrite the moment, a step forward, a word spoken, a shoulder offered. But the past doesn't barter, it just lingers. And yet, is witnessing without action truly void of meaning? Is it possible that presence alone carries its own kind of weight? Maybe the act of seeing is not always the same as choosing not to act. Sometimes the body locks up to protect the soul, and sometimes the soul bears the bruise anyway. In the soft dark of night, there are people you remember without trying, people whose pain didn't reach your voice, but landed in your chest, and you carry them, not to punish yourself, but because love, even unspoken, has a strange way of keeping company. The paradox is quiet but sharp. To witness and do nothing can feel like doing harm, but doing something isn't always within reach. And sometimes morality isn't a question of good or bad, it's a matter of capacity. By now, your breath may be slowing. Let it. Let the weight you carry stretch beside you on the bed. It doesn't need to vanish. It only needs somewhere soft to rest. Because next, we step into a gentler dilemma. Is it okay to smile, to feel joy, when the world is still breaking just outside the window? The ethics of joy in a broken world. A soft breeze carries laughter through a cracked window. Somewhere, music plays faintly. A child's giggle, a shared joke, a moment of brightness. And yet, beyond that window, the world bleeds. Wars rage. People grieve. The planet warms. Species vanish. And injustice hisses like smoke beneath the surface of ordinary life. So the question creeps in. How can I smile when others are drowning? It's a question that gnaws gently, like a whispered doubt in the middle of a beautiful moment. You're eating ice cream in the sun and suddenly recall the refugee camps. You're dancing in the living room, only to remember the headlines from this morning. The paradox crashes into your heart like warm sunlight interrupted by a passing cloud. Does your joy dishonor someone else's pain? And yet, maybe joy isn't an escape. Maybe it's a quiet rebellion. In the face of cruelty and collapse, joy might be the thread that keeps the human spirit intact. Not because it ignores pain, but because it knows pain deeply and dares to sing anyway. Two friends sit on a porch swing under twilight. "Do you ever feel guilty laughing?" one asks, staring into the horizon. "Sometimes," the other replies. "But then I think, maybe joy is what the world's asking us to keep alive." In the darkest of times, some people make art. Others dance barefoot in their kitchens. A grandmother tells stories that make children giggle through tears. These aren't acts of ignorance. They're acts of remembrance. A remembrance of what makes life worth fighting for. Still, it's delicate. Joy can become a weapon when it's flaunted, or a shield when it's used to numb. There's a fine line between savoring life and insulating oneself from it. The ethics of joy aren't about how much we feel. It's about how we hold it. Do we hold it alone, tightly clenched? Or do we let it ripple outward, an invitation, not an exclusion. There's something sacred in small delights, a flower blooming through concrete, the warmth of tea, the echo of laughter between two people who carry invisible wounds. Joy is not an absence of sorrow. It is often born from sorrow, a fragile flame we cradle in trembling hands. Maybe, the first friend says, the point isn't to feel bad for being happy. Maybe the point is to let joy make us softer, more awake, so we don't turn away from the world, but meet it, fully alive. The second nods, slowly. The sky deepens into indigo. Joy does not demand permission. It does not ask us to fix the world before it shows up. It simply waits for someone brave enough to feel it without guilt and offer it without pride. That is the paradox. In a broken world, joy may be the most fragile emotion, and yet the most ethical. So let joy shimmer where it will. It is not your apology to the world. It may be your offering. And when you hold it lightly, without shame, you are not dishonoring grief. You are reminding it what hope sounds like. Next, we'll step deeper into another contradiction, one just as ancient and just as human. When doing the right thing hurts. The virtue that turns to violence. You meant well. That's how it always starts, doesn't it? A quiet urge to help, to protect, to make things better. Maybe you stepped in during a heated conversation, thinking you'd mediate, but instead, everyone left angrier. Maybe you stood up for your values and watched someone else wilt under your words. There's that subtle shift where conviction turns rigid, where belief sharpens into blade. Do you think I was wrong for saying that? One voice asks in the hush of a late-night walk. I think maybe you were too sure. The other replies, their foot kicking a small stone along the path. History remembers many such moments, when people burned books to save minds, or raised villages to cleanse souls. The desire to do good, untempered, becomes fire. And fire never asks if it's warming or destroying. A revolution meant to free the people can become the prison. A sermon meant to heal can become the silence that shames. And still, it doesn't start with violence. It starts with virtue, with the feeling that you are right, that you must be. And once you are sure you're good, it becomes so easy to stop listening. Easy to think that doubt is weakness, that compromise is betrayal, that anyone who questions you must be the villain. That's when the descent begins, not loud or explosive, but quiet, subtle, like a slope you didn't realize you were sliding down until the valley opens up and you're looking at what you've crushed beneath your own feet. The higher the moral ground, the easier it is to look down. A soft voice interrupts. I told my sister she was being irresponsible, but I think I just wanted her to act more like me. The reply is tender, careful. It's okay. You wanted to help. Just, next time, maybe start by asking what she needs. Because maybe righteousness isn't about being right. Maybe it's about being curious. Maybe humility isn't the absence of values, but the space that lets them breathe. What if your greatest strength isn't the force of your conviction, but the quiet way you hold it loosely, like a lantern instead of a sword? There's a kind of goodness that doesn't need to win. It doesn't punish. It doesn't dominate. It simply arrives, open-palmed, and asks, "What do you need?" And in that moment, it listens. So step down. Not from truth, but from the pedestal, from the high tower that turns people into silhouettes. Let your certainty soften. Let your virtue stretch wide enough to hold the trembling, the unsure, the voices you once tuned out. Because next, we'll arrive at a threshold not of defeat, but of surrender. Not the kind that gives up, but the kind that finally lets go. The wisdom of letting go. The sky doesn't scream when the sun slips beneath it. It simply darkens, quietly, softly. Letting go isn't loud. It doesn't tear or snap. More often, it's like mist lifting from a lake at dawn, unnoticed by everything except the stillness it leaves behind. And yet, we are taught to grip, taught to clench our fists around what we love, what we fear, what we strive for, as if release is the same as loss, as if surrender means giving up. But what if the truest wisdom isn't in holding on, but in the art of loosening? "I just don't know when to stop," she whispered into the stillness of their shared kitchen. Her friend looked up from his cup of tea. "Maybe that's not a flaw," he said, "but a moment waiting to become a decision." We grow up believing that persistence is sacred, that the longer we endure, the stronger we are. Finish the race. Tough it out. Fix it. But at some point, pushing turns into resisting the natural flow. Effort becomes a kind of armor, shiny, proud, and exhausting to wear. Like a swimmer flailing in the sea, we forget that sometimes floating keeps us alive longer than struggling ever will. Trees know how to let go. Each autumn they loosen their grip on every leaf, not out of defeat, but as preparation, as a kind of trust. They don't mourn the shedding. They ready themselves for stillness, knowing spring will come. The wave doesn't try to stiffen into shape. It surrenders, reshapes, crashes, reforms. In every crash is a rebirth. Still, we fear that letting go means erasing identity. Who are we if we stop trying? What remains when the effort ends? That fear runs deep, deeper than we admit. But here's the paradox. In the very act of release, something truer often surfaces. A version of self not masked by performance or tension, but revealed in ease. We stop striving to become and begin to simply be. A man once sat in a quiet field after walking away from a job he thought defined him. For the first time in years, his breath felt unmeasured, wide. "It's strange," he told a passing stranger. "I thought I'd feel like I was drowning, but instead, I think I've finally stopped paddling in a dry well." There is courage in continuing, but there is also courage in stopping, knowing when the thread has frayed too thin, when the chapter has closed, even if you don't yet have a new one to open. Letting go isn't laziness. It's a deep kind of listening. A moment when you hear, perhaps for the first time, the quiet voice beneath all the striving saying, "This weight was never yours to carry forever." And so, we practice the gentle art of yielding, not with collapse, but with trust, like clouds releasing rain, like breath releasing tension, like hearts learning to soften after years of clenching. Let go, not in despair, but in reverence. Because what's coming is not absence, it's origin, not silence as emptiness, but silence as beginning, the soft space where something new can breathe. And perhaps, in that stillness, the self that emerges is not weaker, but freer. The silence that births all things. There's a kind of hush that doesn't just fill a room, it becomes the room. A hush so deep it feels like a presence, like something watching but not judging, just aware. Before the first word was spoken tonight, before this video even started, there was silence. Not the awkward kind that demands to be filled, but the kind that welcomes, that waits, that holds everything without needing anything. It's strange, isn't it? How silence often feels like a void, when it might actually be the most full thing in existence. Before thought, before movement, before light, there was no chaos, no music, no voice, just that soft, total stillness that gives birth to all that comes after. Two people sit on a park bench. One of them reaches into their bag and pulls out a thermos. They don't speak. The other, staring ahead at the trees, doesn't turn. But after a moment, their hand reaches out, wordless, and the thermos is passed. That small moment? Nothing said, yet everything shared. In science, they speak of a singularity, a point before time began, all of matter and space compressed into something smaller than a grain of dust. No sound, no stars, just infinite density and stillness. Then, all at once, expansion, creation, motion, noise. And yet, some say the silence never left. It just folded itself into the background, became the space between breaths, between thoughts, between heartbeats. "Do you ever feel?" she whispers as they lie side by side in the dark, like the world is loud even when it's quiet. He answers after a long pause, "Only when I forget how to listen." Silence isn't the absence of meaning, it's the condition that makes meaning possible. A blank page doesn't lack poetry. It holds it, curled up and waiting. The pause before a song begins is not empty. It's sacred. It frames the melody to come. We're used to thinking of silence as passive, but what if it's not? What if silence isn't what's left when everything stops, but what allows everything to begin? It's not void. It's not death. It's not the end of the story. It's the heartbeat beneath it, the breath that was always there, even when you didn't notice. There's a word someone almost says at the grocery checkout. Their mouth opens, then closes again. The moment passes, but the silence that wraps around it, it's not awkward. It's tender, like the universe holding its breath, waiting for the right time to speak. Sometimes, the most generous thing we can offer is to say nothing, not because we don't care, but because words would only cloud the truth. A hand held, a glance understood. Silence becomes the message itself, and maybe that's what you've been feeling tonight. Beneath the flow of these paradoxes, the quiet hum underneath, a kind of permission to stop trying so hard, to stop naming, explaining, proving, because even thought begins in silence, even identity grows from it. You weren't born with a name. You didn't start with opinions. You were just here, held by the soft womb of not yet. The paradox is this: silence is not the absence of all things. It's the presence of everything, not yet formed, not yet claimed, but already possible. So let it hold you now, not to erase you, but to remind you that you were never just the noise. You were also the space that cradles it. And in this moment, eyes closed, breath soft, perhaps you're not falling asleep. Perhaps you're returning to the quiet that never left, returning to the you that never needed to be spoken aloud, returning to the silence that births all things. And from here, we drift gently into the final paradox, where the self is not something to find, but something to rest in. The self that sleeps without a name. There is a kind of peace that does not require permission. No badge, no backstory, just stillness. It's the hush that arrives when striving ends, not from surrender, but from remembering something softer, older, more honest than effort. At the end of this journey, there's no more need to explain yourself, no pressure to define where you've arrived. You simply are, and for once, that is enough. Do you ever feel like, when you sleep, you stop being you? The voice was drowsy, half curious, half drifting. The other replied gently, "Maybe that's the point. Maybe the you that worries so much gets to rest too. We spend so much of our lives naming ourselves. I am this. I am that. I am someone's child, someone's partner, someone's ambition or fear or promise. Identity hums constantly, a mental murmur that loops from one mirror to the next. But what happens when we lay all that down? Not in despair, but in trust, like placing your tools back on the shelf at the end of a day's work. You don't cease to exist. You return. You become the part of you that never needed a name in the first place. Sleep is not silence. It is a homecoming, a rehearsal for release, the gentle folding back into the fabric of something wider than self, a place where the mind lets go of its own echo and the body, for once, isn't performing. It's just being, breathing, floating. One might ask, isn't it lazy to rest? But the wiser voice whispers back, or is it brave? Brave to believe you don't have to earn your right to be here every moment. And in that stillness, a strange clarity glows. The paradox of rest, that it is not absence, but presence in its most elemental form. When you close your eyes, not out of exhaustion, but reverence, you stop becoming, you stop judging, and what remains isn't failure, it's truth. You are not what you produce. You are not your latest worry. You are the awareness that holds it all, quietly, like night holds stars. So here, now, at the end of all these wandering thoughts and winding paradoxes, allow yourself to soften. Let everything you've tried to be fall away, not as defeat, but as freedom. There is no goal here. There is no enlightenment to capture. Just the breath, just the hum, just you resting without a script, without a label, without even the need to try. And maybe, just maybe, that is the most ethical act of all. Not because the world asks for it, but because your soul does. You've walked with wonder, through illusion and identity, through silence and surrender. You've let questions guide you deeper than answers ever could. And now, at last, you are invited to stop. Not abruptly, not anxiously, but like dusk leaning into night. Close your eyes. Let it all fall away. You are not the same you who started this video. And that is the quiet miracle of it all. So, are you still you? Maybe you never really were. Maybe you were only ever the space where thoughts pass like birds across a twilight sky, silent, brief, ungraspable. You've traveled through 100 paradoxes, but none of them needed solving. They weren't doors to answers. They were windows into stillness, into you, or what's left when even you sleeps. There is a kind of peace that comes not from knowing, but from not needing to. So if you've forgotten where this all began, good, because forgetting is a form of freedom. Let the final paradox cradle you now. The deeper you drift into sleep, the more awake your awareness becomes. And the person who wakes tomorrow might not be the same one who just let go. Sleep well.